This is the time, place schedule for, North End School District, Board of Directors work session. So you have a flag here somewhere. That's why I don't see it. So we all need it. Well, I pledge you. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Or we have, Julie Hammond, Megan Cross, our Hazio, Michelle Roberts, myself, Jason McClintock, Anna Hewitt, all aboard. And first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
I'm gonna motion to add EST service credits to number 7.
Any objection to that? All right, so number 7 number adjourned, which is 7 becomes 8, and number 7 is the ESD service credits issue. All right, having made that motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. So we move on to the local option levy issue. Here, first off, I think we have a presentation by David Williams of Piper Standing. That must be you.
That is me.
I think I met you before, yes.
I'm not a random guy in a suit. And I think he's bringing on my slides. While he does, let me just give a little bit of like, okay, why is Piper Sandler here talking about local option levy? We, of course, by and large, serve the school districts around their debt financing and school bond related needs. We are a financial services underwriting firm. But that positions us to have some unique expertise around the property tax system in Oregon, because of course, bonds interact with the property tax system immensely. And so we like to share that that expertise when we can, and help you all understand this interesting tool of the local option levy. Me personally, I've been with Piper for about 2.5 years now. Before that, I had my own 25-year career in Oregon's K-12 system. I'm not an educator, but I did work for the Oregon School Boards Association, a large district out of the River, and another large district centered around the footwear company in Beaverton. And then Northwest Regional ESD in a variety of strategic initiative and chief of staff on the board. So I also have that basic knowledge, having worked with school funding and other school tax related issues. So I bring that to me. Very honored to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for your service on the board. Having worked for OSBA and for boards and districts, I know that they was trying to do, so thank you. So let's talk about local option levy. Please, next slide. So local option levy, what is this? This is an interesting thing. So local option levy is a unique opportunity for a school district to raise additional funds for operating funds locally in the form of property tax. This tool was created in 1997 under ballot measure 50. We're going to talk a little bit about Measure 50 because that is the reason it's here. Measure 50, of course, is what gave us the wonderful world of assessed value framework in the way we levy and collect taxes in Oregon. And it created this other tool because it knew that there was going to be suppression of value for jurisdictions, not just school districts, but all jurisdictions. Well, I shouldn't say all, for school districts, cities, counties, special districts, to seek voter approval for serial local option limits. Notably, we'll get to this, ESDs do not have this authority, and community colleges may or may not, it's not been tested and none of them have it. You do have actually 2 opportunities for a local option levy. You can do an operating levy, which is a 5-year limit per voter approval, or a 10-year capital levy. I would note that nobody in the state has ever done a 10-year capital levy, mostly because a bond levy is a far more powerful tool, because a capital levy, a local option levy authority, as we'll get into, is affected by this thing called compression. So it is a variable collection tool, whereas a bond levy is a fixed collection tool that does not vary. So that's why you have that dynamic. The local option levy can be levied as a fixed dollar amount or a rate per thousand. Much like a capital levy, no levy in the state on the school district side has ever levied a fixed dollar amount. Because again, of your inability in that stage to take advantage of value growth during the life of the levy. So levying as a levy rate instead of a fixed dollar amount allows the levy to float as values in the community go up. Conversely, as values go down, it will slow down. So it is subject to majority voter approval at either the May or November election. You do latently in full, do all my homework. You actually have the ability to go in the September or March election, but those elections still have the old double majority requirement. You have to get a 50% yes and a 50% turnout. So nobody uses those elections at all anymore. It was all May. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is just again the operating and capital levy. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the capital components of it. The operating levy part of this, the 5-year serial levy, notably, it can basically be used for any legal expense of the district. You can spend it on anything you are legally allowed to spend money. It is fully discretionary funds for the school district. We were talking about this earlier, when you put a bond on the ballot and you get a bond approval, you are tied to the ballot title, which describes what the bond can be spent on. A local option levy, while a ballot title will reasonably describe what you expect to spend those funds on, it is not binding unlike a bond at the time. Okay. Next slide, please. And I'm trying to run through this quickly. I understand you have a big agenda. I am totally okay with questions as we go to, so feel free to interject. So we do have to do a little bit of a property tax history lesson in order to understand the uniqueness of the local option levy and also some key caveats with it when you think about it as a tool for raising operational dollars. Okay. So the first thing we had was back in 1990, we had ballot measure 5 passed. Ballot measure 5 capped the total amount of property taxes that can be collected on an individual property. It said $15 per 1,000 of real market value. You notice I highlight RMV, real market. And it broke that down further. It said no more than $5 per thousand for all education entities, which are only the 3: school district, BSD, and community college, and $10 for all other local governments. So city, county, if you have separate fire jurisdictions with parks districts or library districts, etc., they all fall under that $10. Okay, so you have your separate sort of schools have their own special lane over here with the $5, and then $10 for all general government. And again, that's on real market value. So that passed in 1990, and that cruised along as an attempt to sort of lower property taxes statewide. Well, of course, what happened in the 90s? You had just phenomenal value growth during the 1990s. And that, again, created another round of property tax reform. There was ballot measure 47, which was unworkable. So the legislature kicked out as a way to modify it, ballot measure 50 in 1997, which was then approved. And what measure 50 did is it left measure 5 in place. So you still have these caps on real market value tax collections. But it said, instead of levying your taxes, say that $5 on the real market value of a property, we're going to levy it on something called assessed value. So we're going to create a framework that says we're going to value your property, and then we're going to cap the growth of that value year over year. So we capped it, the measure caps it at 3%. So your property, every property in the state of Oregon, their growth in assessed value is capped at 3% a year. It cannot grow more than 3% a year. It can grow less. If market value collapsed and push that downward, it will go down, right? But it can't go any more than 3%. Notably, unlike certain states south of here, that doesn't change if you sell the property, right? That will be in perpetuity unless we amend the Constitution. So every property will just grow at that 3% a year forever and ever, right? So you can imagine a scenario where your market values are going up 6, 7, 8% a year, but your assessed value is only going up at 3% a year. So you're creating this gap between assessed value and real market value. Okay. Now remember, our rates over here are $5 and $10. Those are limits on the dollars collected as it relates to real market value. But the levies now, these rates are now being applied to assessed value, right? We create new rates. We just said, we'll take whatever that is, that $5, and we're gonna put it on assessed value. So that $5 is going to collect less and less as it relates to real market value. So that $5 in 1997 was collecting $5 per thousand real market value. Today, that $5 is probably collecting $3.50. It's not actually collecting $5 because of that change. $3.50 in real market value. Right, so that's a key framework here, okay? The other thing in 1997 that Measure 50 did is it assigned every jurisdiction in the state what's called a permanent rate. So the school district every year, and you as a board, when you adopt your budget resolution, you levy your permanent rate. You can't change it. There's no opportunity. You can't levy lower or higher. And it's, what do we decide, 430? No, that's the total, 416-ish. I've got that on, you'll see. So you have a permanent rate that you're levying every year, and the community college is like 70 cents and the ESD is like 40 cents, right? So those rates are non-changeable, and that is what is generating revenue for the school district. Now, in school district land, of course, that's all offset in the state schools fund formula and more or less spread around statewide, along with all the other school district permanent rates in the state, right? So that's a key piece. The last thing that Measure 50 did is it created this local option levy authority. And so we know these things are gonna get funny. So let's go ahead and give you the authority to ask your voters for an additional levy above your permanent rate, but still underneath that Measure 5 cap, that $5 per thousand of real market value. We're required to. Okay, so it said that. So that's that. Okay, so we know the creation. So there are a couple of other pieces that have been added to this that sort of limit your ability to collect and attempt to equalize it. We're gonna get to some math in a minute, so we can show you what this looks like, right? So we also, the state said, we don't want too many districts to get too far outside of the sort of rough equalization band with a local option levy. So we're gonna cap the amount you can collect. There are 3 caps. One is that constitutional Measure 5 limit. The other is a dollars per student that is increased every year by 3%. That actually was 2,000 when it was initially enacted, and it's going up 3% a year. It's now at that 2388, right? And then, or 25% of your total formula. You'll see later on a spreadsheet we have for North Bend, and it's your cap is the lower of any of those 3. For North Bend, your cap was the Measure 5 limit. That would collect, that is the lowest of those 3 limits, and therefore you could theoretically collect no more than $6.5 million. Okay? Keep that in mind. Equalization grants. The state also said, hey, we know that not every community has an equal ability based on property value in the community to levy an equal rate. $1 here is not the same as $1 in Lake Oswego. So we're going to give some grants to kind of try to balance it out if you pass a local option. So they said we're going to take all the districts in the state and we'll find out what's the 70th percentile in sort of property value per student. Okay, and if you're below that level and you pass a local option levy, we will true you up as though you were at that 70th percentile. Okay, today, if you had a local option levy in place today for fiscal 25, I should say, you would have received a 103% grant. And that means you're well below that 70th percentile. And for whatever if you levied $1 million, you would get $1.3 million in a local option equalization grant from the state. This comes out of the state school fund biennially, and is appropriated by the legislature. I note this, one, that's a pretty powerful grant. That would be one of the highest. There are, I think, only 6 districts that are receiving equalization grants, because you'll see the list of districts that have levies later. This is subject to state appropriation, right? So while this has never been a problem because it's a carve out of the state school fund, nobody ever bats an eye at it. More and more districts considering a local option levy, if they fall into this, that dollar amount could start to get fairly large. Now, I think in your case, it would not be large enough to sort of cause any political consternation from the powers that be. But there are, for instance, we were presenting a similar presentation to the Salem Kaiser School District. And in their case, given size and scale, you're talking about maybe upwards of a $20 million equalization grant from the state. All of a sudden, that really shows up in a meaningful way. So it's just a caveat that does require biannual appropriation from the state. Okay, so you have these limits and you have some equalization. Next slide. Okay, so back to figuring out how much we're gonna raise. So remember this chart just visually shows you kind of what that gap looks like. This is statewide, this is not North Bend. You can see the where the two lines diverge in 97. So your blue line is that 3%, very predictable growth rate over time. And then your dashed orange line is the real market value, and you can see what happened in 2008 through 2011 when obvious housing crisis and declined property values. Now, this graph would look different jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Notably, Deschutes County, that dashed line goes well below the blue line in 2008, right? They were well underwater at that point. They are now back above it, but they were well underwater at that point. So, notably that would happen. And when that does, your assessed values get suppressed in that instance. You don't maintain a higher AV, they get suppressed with that. Okay, but that space between those two lines is really what we're talking about. We're talking about where the local option levy exists. Next. Okay, so further figuring out how to calculate this. And this is important because calculating how much you will collect in the local option levy gets a little complicated for this reason called compression. Okay, so the tax is levied on individual properties, right? So every property pays their property tax bill. And I encourage you all to go home tonight, pull up your property tax bill and see what's on there. You can see all the various levies that are being levied. You can see what your real market value is and what your assessed value is. They would be different. The jurisdictional average, you'll see later, is 54%. So the average property in North Bend is worth 54% of its real market value. That's the gap between those two. Okay, that's average. And in the world of local option levies, averages mean nothing. They don't help us, right? When understanding how much this will collect for a variety of reasons. Okay, so some properties, so you remember, if we go back, don't go back a few slides, but if we go back a few slides in our head, if you remember, you have this $5 per thousand real market value cap, right? And then you have the levy rates being applied to assessed value. So if your house is worth 50%, if the assessed value is 50% of its real market value, your local option, your permanent rate collections, your permanent rates are going to be, I think we decided $5.30 is the total. You're going to pay the full $5.30. But if your piece of property happened to be 100% of real market value, you'd only pay $5. You wouldn't pay $5.30. So it would get compressed. All the levies would get compressed down to that $5, okay, in the permanent rates. And you'll see we have some math to show you. There are some properties for which this is the case. Not many, but there are some, and there's a way to figure that out. But as you add levy rates on top of that $5.30, let's say you added $1 levy. Now you're at $6.30 as a levy against a property owner. More properties will get closer to that $5 levy. And therefore, when that happens, the first thing that is compressed is the local option, down to whatever would equal $5 per thousand of real market value in tax collections, right? You can ignore the next to last bullet. There's no competition among competing organizations, competing jurisdictions. For you all, that's in the local government side. Yeah, good. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about what that looks like, because again, this is property by property. So we have two different properties here. These are random. They're not North Bend. They're just math problems to show us. So on one hand, we have a house that it's got a real market value of $600,000, but it's only got an assessed value now of $360,000, right? That's about 60% of its value, right? So it's got a gap there. So I could levy in that space because it's got pretty good space. But over on the other side now, we've got a commercial building. where it's real market value and assessed value, the assessed value is 99% of its real market value, right? So on that property, I'm probably not gonna have much space, my levy's probably going to get compressed. And that is by and large the case with commercial industrial properties. They have different ways of depreciating assets and revaluing assets to the degree that their assessed value is often very much 90% to 100% of the market. By and large, your residential properties district-wide will be the ones driving that gap to 54%. So if the average in the jurisdiction is 54%, I would hazard to say the average residential home, residential property, think zoning R1, not necessarily a residence living there, but a house. That assessed value is probably going to be below, in some cases, below 50% of real market. Okay? So by and large, that will be the base of properties where the local option exists. So let's go to the next. Okay, so then we get the question of, well, so is this worth it? How much is this gonna collect? What do we do? And there's a slide here with a whole lot of numbers on it. And I'm not gonna go into a lot of them. We may go back one to see this, but go forward one slide where I call out just 2024. Okay, so let's walk through this slide a little bit. We'll start on the left-hand side. You have, 3,400 plus students. You've got state school fund revenue. This is fiscal 25. State school fund revenues of 37 and change million. Below that, you can see the permanent rate. So these are the unchangeable rates. When you adopt your budget, you adopt a $4.16 permanent rate levy. Community college 70 cents, EST 44 cents for a total of $5.50. Right, that's on the permanent rate side. Then just below that, I can see, oh, wait a minute, because we can get this from the assessor. You are actually losing some money to compression. The school district itself is losing out on a grand total of $17,274 in due to compression. So that's telling me right off the bat. There's not a lot, but there are some properties that are not paying that full $5.30 levy, the permanent, right? Because you're losing money to compression. So some amount of that is being compressed out of the system. You can see 3,000 for the community college and 1,800 for the ESD, right? So not a lot, but there is some. So as I think, remember, my exercise here is I gotta figure out how much do we think we can estimate a local option levy will raise. Okay, so let's go to the middle column. So we start there with total property values. You've got 3 billion, just over $3 billion in total taxable property in the jurisdiction, okay? But your AV, your total assessed value of those collective properties is $1.6 billion, right? So that's that 54%. That's the average. That's average district one, right? So, okay, so 1.6 billion is what we will be levying against, because we levy on assessed value, not on real market. Okay, we got another compression example below where we figure that out. So we figure, okay, the math here gets pretty easy then at this point to create a theoretical maximum collection. The math, so that's $1 per thousand, right? What was our number up there of total AV? 1.67 billion. Well, guess what? $1 per thousand raises 1.67 million because you just moved the decimal place over. And that's your theoretical on $1 per thousand local option. Your theoretical maximum is 1.67 million, right? And you can see that the math is simple at 50 cents or $1.50, or frankly, on up as high as you want to go. Now we do over on the far right column, we do look at your limits that exist, and we know, your constitutional limit is the one that applies at 6.5 million, if you remember that from earlier. Obviously, these levy rates, you're not approaching that 6.5 million, so there's plenty of space within those limits. There are districts that hit that limit. Portland Public is at that limit. Think higher value districts like Oswego, Ashland, they are both at their limits. Their limits are actually the dollars per student. Hence the law change to index that and raise that all the time. So you have a lot of space there. Great. So let's go back to that theoretical levy collection. Okay. So let's say $1 per thousand and $1.67 million. So why is that a theoretical maximum, and why should I be concerned? If I'm going out to the voters, I don't want to say we're going to get $1.67 million, because if you remember over here, compression laws. there are properties that are not paying the full $5.30. So if I add a buck on that $5.30, they will pay zero of that buck. Because they're already not paying some portion of the permit rates, they will pay zero. And because I'm adding a buck on top of that, I'm going to have some other unknown number of properties get into compression and pay somewhere between $1 and zero. They're going to fall somewhere on that spectrum. So it will be less. There is not, without doing a property by property analysis, literally getting from the assessor an Excel file of every single property in the district, there's not a way of reasonably projecting what that is. So you all as a jurisdiction have to decide sort of either you do that property by property analysis, or you make some educated guesses. Okay, and those educated guesses go something like this. Okay, if I'm going to go out to the voters, I want to be able to have a reasonable conversation with them about what a levy is going to collect, because what are we paying for that with that levy? Some portion of operations, and I want to be able to note what that is. That's the selling point of any campaign, right? Just like a bond, I want to say what I'm building with it. Here, you want to say what you're buying with this. But you don't want to overpromise, and all of a sudden you pass this, and it turns out you're collecting 1.2 million instead of 1.6 million, right? And whoops, actually, that's 5 positions I can't hire anymore. So we need to make sure we're sort of on the under promise over deliver, right? So yes.
So does urban renewal at all affect the option levies?
So urban renewal is really interesting. So urban renewal, when an urban renewal is in place,
You have to freeze.
it reduces your permanent rate collections, because it sort of still collects it, but it moves it over to the local government side.
Mhm.
Okay. Weirdly enough, if you have a local option levy, that means fewer properties would be in compression on the education side. The local option levy would come.
Okay.
Right, that's the weird interaction between urban renewal and a local option levy. So if an urban renewal comes off, your permanent rate collections go up. Therefore, throwing more properties into compression on the school district side, your local option levy conversely would collect less.
Okay.
It is a weird twist with the way urban renewal works, and the way these two limits, the $5 and the $10, bounce off each other.
So, but I'm wondering, so but does any of the local options, that doesn't get diverted to the urban renewal, it's just instead reducing, the $5?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure.
That's
Perfect.
That's right. Excellent question. So the next question I would get is, okay, so great, I could just make up a number. Let's take 10% off of that. Let's take 20%. I don't know. How do I know what kind of haircut I should give to my projected local option levy collections? Obviously, once you levy a tax and you have experience, you now are levying it maybe 2-3 years down the road, you'll have a reliable sense of what the collections are. This is all about that first instance, about knowing what you're going to get the first time out, right? So let's go next slide. So the best way we can do this for sort of the napkin math approach is let's just look at everybody that has a local option levy and see how much they're losing, right? And it's kind of ballpark. Now, if you look at this list, this is the universe of all districts with a local option levy. There's a really, really tiny footnote down there, adding one to the list. Nia County School District up the coast, they passed one in May. We don't have any experience with them yet on collections, therefore they're not called out separately, but they do have one that just went in place. You'll notice the second to last column, the percent loss column, that is how much is being lost to compression in each of those jurisdictions. And you'll notice it's kind of all over the place, right? So we have to make some educated guesses about what is going on in those areas. There are some obvious. The higher the levy rate, the more likely you're going to push more properties into compression, right? So obviously the higher up we go. The lower the levy rate, the less likely you are to push properties into compression, because you're just not building as high of a total tax, right? But we see low numbers near the top and high numbers near the bottom. So what does that mean? The next thing we have to do is we have to make some assumptions about what those communities look like. And the best, again, without doing a full property by property analysis, the best tool you can do is to look at this list and kind of try to figure out which of those jurisdictions is most like North Bend. And decide, does their loss of compression, is that a rational number for you to begin to use in your first year estimates? Again, remember, it doesn't impact actual collection. Actual collections will be what they are, and once you have experience, you'll know what it is. But it's about making that first estimate. And I emphasize this because Sherwood School District, they had some financial exigence 2 years ago. Deficit spending, they were in real trouble. They went to their voters and they said, hey, our bad, things got messed up, we need a local option. And they passed a local option. And they had some of the estimates and they made an assumption that Sherwood is a largely residential community. Right? Well, look at their number up there. They're losing 16% to compression. That surprised them. They thought more like 5%, more like our friends in Lake Oswego is what they were projecting. So that shocked them. And what they realized, because they did an after action report and looked at all their properties, they have far more light industrial and utility properties than they realized. And that's where that loss occurred, right? So the nearest trend you can draw from this is jurisdictions that are largely residential. So like Oswego up there at the top, Falls City, Seaside, Sweet Home, Sisters, right? Largely residential properties, not big industrial play, they don't have downtown, like all that kind of stuff. Those are going to be in the lower single digit in loss to conversion. Because remember, most houses, most residential properties will have a far wider gap. Jurisdictions with more industrial base, Portland, downtown, right? North Clackamas, a lot of Southeast Portland industrial space. Corvallis with also non-taxable property. Interesting, right? Weston Wilsonville was probably a little bit of a surprise. Hood River, a lot of industrial property out there. Tiger's Bald, and a lot of commercial property. They're all losing significantly more to compression because of that dynamic where a lot of your industrial and commercial property will be much closer to that 90%, right? So the caution here is, as you think about this, if you were to say, great, let's go for a buck, what was it, 1.67 million, let's go for a buck, we think that's great. You probably need to make some rational assessment around what sort of haircut you want to give to that number when talking to voters about what you think you can reasonably expect in the first year. The other caveat that I think a lot of your colleague districts on here would say in that first year is be cautious with budgeting the first cycle, right? So if you were to put this on the May ballot and pass it, you will levy it for fiscal 27, right? We're in fiscal 26 right now. You would levy it for the fiscal 27 budget along with passing your budget resolution, right? Be cautious in budgeting robustly for the expenditure of it in fiscal 27 because of that dynamic. So figure out where is the balance point, the tolerance for how much to budget or how much to amend a budget mid-year when the revenues do materialize, right? That would be the caution in that instance.
But 103%
So great question. So if you remember, the local option equalization grant, you're eligible for 103%, and that's not respective to the dollar amount you raise, right? So you raise 500,000, you get 103% of that. You raise 1.5 million, you get 103%, right? Because it is a legislative appropriation every biennium, you only get it for the biennium following passage. So if you pass in May of 26, you've got to wait until fiscal 28. Right, so there's a full legislative session in spring of 27 for a budget for the 27-29 biennium. That would be the first biennium in which you would receive the local option. So fiscal, I know the fiscal years get confusing when we start thinking about. Well, in fiscal 26 right now, we don't have a local option. If you passed one, you would begin to collect and therefore be able to spend in fiscal 27, and then you would receive the local option equalization grant in addition in fiscal 28, so a year later. So yeah, great clarification. I think there's not another slide, and we'll advance forward, just make sure, but I think that's where we're at. I'm happy to answer. Oh, right, a good summary slide. Very complicated. Local option levy has lots of weird vagaries in it. It's a challenge to predict. However, it is probably the only meaningful choice you have for raising additional revenue for operations. Really is the only thing. I'm happy to answer any questions now. Also, feel free to funnel them through Tim as they come through later. As you think about this, happy to respond to any questions. So, yeah.
There was an important piece on there, and the range, does that change over? I mean, yeah,
Well, this is great. So let's go up a couple slides. Here's my one that has like 1,000 numbers. So the local option, one more, local option equalization grant is, every year is gonna get calculated, and again, remember, it's based on that 70th percentile. If you can make out the very bottom orange bar on here, you'll notice that your back math on this, your theoretical grant, varied quite wildly over the last 5 years. 123%, 143, 203, 201, 108, 103. So there are a couple of drivers there that are important to note. One is where you fall on that 70th percentile. Oh, so one part of that is what is happening with property value in the whole state, right? Because you're relative to others. But a very important driver, which is probably why it has declined to the point where it's at 103 versus 203, is your student enrollment. So if you remember, you're ranked based on your property value per student. It's not relative to students' individual. It's property value. So if you think year over year, the property value in North Bend doesn't change dramatically, right? It goes up or down a couple percentage points, right? It's not going 20%. Now, if you all of a sudden take 20% of your students out of the calculation, the remaining students have a much higher property value per student. That will move you up the ranking list, right? You'll be closer to that 70th percentile. If you add 20% of the students on top, now your property value per student goes way down, you'll go down and your grant would go up. So that's what's happening here between 22 and 25, is really a loss of students.
And so which year would they use? So if they're not awarding it to fiscal year.
It's every
28,
year.
So in fiscal year 28, whatever it is, they awarded
That
that
year.
year, and then, okay,
I mean, it's technically the 1 year behind, right? Because
okay,
in fiscal 28, you don't have
yeah.
fiscal 28 EV numbers yet, so
So you
you're
do the
awarded for,
27, but then it'd be each year.
and
starting.
each year you're going forward from there.
I have a question.
Yes,
So it cannot be passed if 50% of the voters do not cast a vote.
no, that's only in March and September elections, which you're not gonna use anyway. So it's just a simple 50% yes in May or June
Oh,
of votes.
so 25% of voters could vote in May.
It can be 12 voters, and as long as you get 7, you pass. Yeah. Technically, we say 50% plus 1, not 50%. Good. I know it's a lot, I know there's a lot of moving parts in this thing.
I guess
Yes.
one more thing too, is just, one of the benefits of this versus bonds too, is there's not a little cost to trying it out. Correct? I mean, isn't it just putting it on?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
there's a like. Putting something on the ballot, you incur a nominal fee to
Yes.
pay for the election itself. Right, there's that bit, and obviously there's the conversation with the public that has to occur. But right, you're not going through, for instance, a big facilities assessment or things like that, to determine. It is a low cost opportunity for the district to have that conversation. Yeah. When people ask me, what's the lead time for putting things on the ballot? With a bond, I say, you need at least a year. Because you've got to do that vision work, you've got to figure out the project plan, you've got to talk about it with the public, you buy in, then you put it on the ballot, then you run a campaign. With a local option levy, it's not, it's more of a 6 to 8 month dynamic because, it's like as you're thinking about now for May, right? And that's the appropriate timeline to begin to think about having an effective conversation with voters. You get, with a bond, you think about it, when you start the bond process, you're not having the conversation with the voters yet, you're doing a lot of development on the front end. The development is right now, it's not super complicated from that. Absolutely.
Any other questions, Sam? How about from the public?
Any questions for David? This is fantastic information. This is a little treat to have you join us. I mean, there's so much information here that we need to know. So we have to move forward. And I think, some of the key takeaways, just the concept of compression. We don't want to If we went for that dollar, we wouldn't want to go out and say we're gonna collect 1.6 million. We would want to build in a buffer there, so maybe 15% or so, to say that we're bringing this lesser amount. I'm under promise full deliver type of thing, and I also think it was very prudent for us if we were to recommend this to the voters to also say to ourselves as a district, in order to be responsible, that we would not use the grant itself for staffing because there's too much variability in that, or too much potential for variability. Instead, we could take that grant and set it aside, use it to help balance out that compression up and down. And then after that's realized, after that's balanced, we could then take that money and stick it in our facilities fund at that level. So we're getting sort of the best of both worlds for that 5-year program. Actually, that's right. So that's 4 years. Yeah. So quite a lot of very important information there, and that's at the dollar, and so we'd also have to consider at what rate we want to go out for. When we get our last couple of bonds, they're just under $1, I believe. That looks a lot better. We talked about some of the things that might be coming off the ballot. So there might be a opportunity for us to present this to those voters. But I think there's a few steps we need to go to. Christina's going to talk about some of the work that she's done with the union and the political action committee there. And in terms of the union's work, they would get some things out here and plan for us. We would work together on the message to put on the ballot. And then we would do some sort of public work together before we brought it to the board vote. And then at that point, we would be stepping back as a district, like if we are the same, because we're not going to get involved in the review.
If we did pass it, and the dollars did come, I know that like superintendent had a lot of ideas on what would be beneficial to us to budgets and the money could discuss it.
Technically, the district will budget the money, but what we would want to be very transparent about is whatever process we use, and let Christine, you want to go ahead and present with your process, and then we can come back to that, because I think she might capture that.
I shall do my best. And I want to thank you guys very much for making time on the agenda for this presentation. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the why we're asking for this and a little bit about what the next steps would be. So we've known about declining enrollment for a long time. We've heard about it for at least the last 3 years. And as you guys know, this spring, we did the reassignments, we did the reduction in force. The district tried to do it the best way possible, where we didn't have to cut anybody and we didn't have anybody really lose a job who was on contract. We had a few people that were on temporary assignments that lost, but they tried to lessen the blow as much as possible. But it was still a blow. It was still a very tough spring, knowing that our class sizes were going to be bigger, knowing that we were going to be teaching different things. Some people we're going to be teaching at different levels, and we were pretty glum. So through my work with the OEA PAC, I came up with the idea and pitched it to Eva and some of the other folks about what if we pursue a levy. This is something that we can do as teachers, as staff, as a community, and say, we did what was necessary to balance the budget, but we know that we can do better for our kids. We know we can do better for the community, and that the levy is how to do it. So we identified our priorities. We want the levy to be about reducing class size K-12, about bringing back some of the electives that got cut K-12, and for supporting our classified staff, because they've had some reductions in force as well. So this summer, I met with the OEA PAC political strategist, Elvise Argueta. I sent you guys, I think you all got the email of my brain dump. Here's all the stuff, because I wanted you guys to be reassured that this wasn't just a good idea. This is a concrete plan. We have resources through the OEA PAC who can, they're supported with donations of some teachers. It's not something that comes out of our union dues, but those of us who are PAC board members pay, or PAC members pay for this staff. So unlike what happened with the bond, the district isn't going to have to pay to survey the community. They're not going to have to pay to access the voter access network and figure out if we're going to send mailers, who are our voters that are definitely going to apply, that sort of thing. So I met with LVs, I roughed out, here's what we would need to do in order to come up with a levy and make it campaign. So at the welcome back meeting on the very first day of in-service, I met with both the classified and the certified staff. And the teachers seemed really, really happy that we had an idea of how we could make things better. Because by this time we're going into synergy, we're seeing our class sizes, we're opening the books and looking at the new curriculum, it's starting to sink in. So, and I gave out a survey to all of our certified teachers, all of our union members last week, and 2/3 of them say they have more students in the classroom. 50% of them say their assignment changed in some way. And you guys have heard of some of the big ones of people moving from one building to another, but we've also had people where the elective that they've taught for years got cut because they had to cover this required class. Or you know, they were just doing one thing and now they've added another thing to kind of pick up the slack. And so we had, I put on there, what would you do to support the levy? And we had people that said they would canvass door to door, people who said that they would donate money and that sort of thing. So it sounds like we do have the support from the teachers. When we launched the bond, there were a few teachers who were very passionate about the bond, but overall the response was pretty tepid. I'm not feeling that with this. You guys agree? No. I'm gonna make sure. I'm not sure if they're just being nice to me because they like me, but I think that I've told them the thing that, you know, Kevin Bogatin's bond didn't pass, Christina Geierman's levy isn't going to either. This has to be about all of the teachers, all of the staff, the whole community coming together and saying, we're doing the best we can, but we can do better. So what we're doing tonight is asking you guys if you think that this is worth pursuing, because you have to say, if you say tonight, no, then we're stopping. We can't do this without you. If you say that you're willing to let us go a little bit further, what would happen is we're going to have meetings where we will definitely invite all of you and everybody, all teachers, students, if you want to come, we will invite, you know, anybody who wants the seat at the table, who lives in North Bend, who works in North Bend, who is affected by this, to write the levy. And the actual levy text is going to be pretty simple, just going to be, here's our priorities and what number we're asking for. If we ask for around $1 on 1,000 of assessed value, it would create about 10 teaching positions and possibly some classified staff as well. So my house at 1535 Garfield, if you're wondering, that's a 2-bedroom. Its real market value is 240,000, but its assessed value is only 110,000. So I'd be paying an extra 110 on my taxes. And that was kind of my takeaway from your presentation, was that it seems scary. The amount that we're going to have to pay each year seems scary when we look at what our houses are actually worth. When we look at the assessed value, I was like, you know what, I could do that. So in addition to writing like the text of the levy, we would figure out, how are we going to be strategic about this? Because if we're asking the community for money, we need to make sure that we have a concrete plan. Here's how we're going to use it. Here's how we're going to make things better. And identify which positions in particular we would bring back. A couple that are at the top of the list already. If we can bring back an elementary music position, not only would those kids be getting music, but also it would fix the scheduling that they've been having trouble with. I know 5th grade at Hillcrest and possibly North Bay, their reading block is now in the afternoon. And if you've ever, I used to sub in elementary afternoon, that's when you do art and you do electives and you do the fun stuff because their focus is gone. And having to do reading, especially in a year where we do the state testing after lunch, that's really not what's best for the kiddos. And at the middle school, right now, they're sharing most of their elective teachers with the high school. So in the morning, they're having class sizes of 20, and then in the afternoon, they're having class sizes of over 30 because of the scheduling. And we have one like rogue gym class where there's nothing else available for an elective. And they've got 43 in them. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say with those examples is we can be strategic, and even if it's just 10 positions, we could really make a difference and make things better for our kids, better for our teachers, and that sort of thing. So what we would do is we would spend the next couple of months with heavy planning. And then in January, we would bring back, here is the text of the levy school board. Here is what we've identified, like have the short version, then the long version. Here is our plan of what we're going to do. And if that works, we would start our campaign. And LV said that we would have to do some fundraising, that it would be, he estimates $20,000 for a campaign. I think we paid significantly more than that for the bond. But we have access to some things that through the PAC that can make our campaign more strategic, where we're not sending out mailers to everybody in North Bend. We can target, we can be like, well, Nathan will vote if it's only a dog catcher on the thing. He votes in every election, and Michelle waits for the president, and decide, who gets that. Just, just as an example, because there are some people like that. I'm one of the people that votes every time, even if I really don't care. I don't know, it feels my civic duty. So I'm rambling now, I'm sorry. I was nervous about this because I feel very passionately about this. I love my school district. I love my school. My coworkers are my best coworkers. I just really feel bad that my best this year isn't the same as my best last year. And this was the only way I could figure out making this better. So do you guys have any questions for me? Is there anything I can do to clarify? No, that was great.
What Christina, the number she's coming up with there for the number of teachers and classified is taking into account, buffer there, some compression loss, which is an important factor in that. We talked about that before we came in. And you're absolutely right, it's not Christina's bond, it's not the union's bond, it's North Bend School, the levy, it's North Bend School District's levy. For the benefit of the children, it's a community levy related to the benefit of the children, it's something that we can decide to pursue. And you're also 100% right, we didn't have the buy-in with staff boots on the ground, and in this case, I imagine we would see a lot of students helping with that process too. So there's a lot of ways in which I can see this becoming something that's very feasible for our community versus the bond, which presented some challenges both times, and just didn't see the people putting the effort into it. In terms of oversight, that would be an important piece, right? We heard that while it is discretionary money, it is truly something that the district ultimately will do what they choose. We're not going to do that. We're going to say, we're going to go out to the public and ask for the money for certain things. That's what we're going to hold ourselves to. And one way of doing that, we suggested, is just have something in every school board packet that shows you what is actually being funded with the money. So that way the public gets to see very transparently what is the funding, and that will help us review the levy. It would also potentially build the trust necessary with our community if we decided to go out for a bond in the future, if we needed to build another one. So there's a lot of benefits to this too. If we decide to do it, it obviously on the flip side of that is might not get it. And just asking for another tax from our public, however, we're gonna see the potential of some of the taxes coming off as well, which could help offset this.
A big part of it is education to the public, because people may not know the difference between a levy and a bond.
Yeah.
And they hear levy and they're thinking bond.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference between these two. And then on the flip side, are we not interested in a bond in any future? Because if we are, this could keep us from that happening. So I love the idea, but then we have to kind of figure out where we're gonna, what we're doing Is the bond gonna be 5 years down the road or 10 or another, or, cause we can't have both,
You can have,
So,
you can have
in
both.
a lot of places.
but I don't think we ever pass both.
Yeah,
Well,
That's
you
what I'm
don't have to
saying.
pass them at the same time, because you pass this one for 5 years and then hopefully people forget 2 years later. No.
I don't know, Michelle has a good point there. What Tim is hoping is with the matching grant that they mentioned that we would get from ODE. That isn't promised to personnel, the way that a levy is in general. So even if we didn't have a bond to build a new school, we could use that money to fix the boiler in the high school so we have consistent heat. We'd use it to fix some of the other things that's wrong with the district.
If we go forward though, I just wanna make sure that we educate that.
Definitely.
A very
Yeah.
small percentage of what a bond would be.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's very true.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
much less.
and if we get lucky and the container port gets filled, our enrollment could go up to the point where in 5 years, when we reassess, we go, you know what, we don't need a levy, let's switch it to a bond. Keep the same rate, so we're not adding an extra tax to people, and then we could use that to, build the school. It's just hard because I know what you're thinking, and I don't want us to tie our hands for something that we need in the future, but Michelle, it's bad.
I do want to, just as a point of clarity, the rule does work out of this big. We put a brand new control system in the building over the summer and some of the wires got crossed. So if you have noticed, we've had some people from Portland and Vancouver over the week in the high school building trying to fix those controls. And we do actually have the money for the upgrade. And what we need to do is this Oregon Department of Education assessment, so we can actually figure out the best way to address the high school. But there will always be, with a district like ours, with any district, we could build a brand new building and there's gonna be facility needs, so we're always gonna have facility needs, so something like this would help contribute to that. But yes, if we needed to build a school, I'm hearing like $63 million, actually to build a pretty good school right now. We would need a bond, no doubt, for that type of process. If that's the case, you're right, there's a couple ways we could approach that, right? And potentially even have, a topic later on the agenda that talks about ways we can maybe postpone that for a little bit.
So today you're just asking for permission to start doing research and processing in January, but ask for actual permission to go.
Yes, because then,
No action, essentially sort of just a sort of consensus. Would you like to see this pursued a little bit more, some more information, something, maybe a committee form and some input from stakeholders, including the board members?
and the tentative date, if you greenlight us, our next union meeting is November 17th at 4:15. If you greenlight us, that could be a great date for us to, as a levy committee. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I just want you to reassure you that.
November 19th, the 19th is in Wednesday. 17th is a Monday. 17th is, yeah. Yeah, when you said it earlier tonight, I was saying, it's like, look. The 9th is the third Wednesday.
So the question is, we're not gonna, but there's no official vote, but the consensus of the board as to whether we want to move forward or let them move forward to see where we go with this. What do we think? Anybody have a problem?
I appreciate the initiative and the passion
Absolutely.
a lot, and I think that's great, so thank you.
I would love more.
Okay, yeah, sounds great. All right, well then I will send you out an official invitation for 19. And if you're available, and we'll see you again in January with our presentation.
Fair enough.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right, next item on the agenda is policy IKF, graduation requirements review and discussion. Policy requirements, graduation requirements.
Graduation requirement, so, we brought some special folks here tonight with some policy IKF. What we brought you tonight is what could potentially be used as a first read, because it is a suggested wording, and we could potentially change some of that wording too. And in order to bring back maybe the policy for a second, where this is coming from is, there's a couple things in here. First of all, last school year, we added what was called the North Bend diploma. And the North Bend diploma is essentially no different than a standard Oregon diploma, aside from an essential skills requirement. And the essential skills requirement was taking the Oregon State assessment or passing an alternative, which right now would be essentially an interim assessment if you didn't pass that Oregon State assessment. The credits are the same. Now, the thing is about that essential skills requirement is it's coming back anyways. So the essential skills piece of that we really had a desire to make sure we had in the Oregon diploma by creating the North Bend diploma was, it's already gonna come back. The second part of that is, it was going to go into effect this school year. And as we know, we have a lot of change happening in all of our schools. We have a lot of pressure on our certified staff, on our classified staff, on our administration. And asking these people to track all these extra requirements is a big task in and of itself, perhaps even an extra person required to do this properly. And that's something that we started this conversation by saying, you know what, maybe we just postpone this a year, ask the board to change the date. And then as we got deeper into the conversations we're hearing and the talk is, well, this assessment's coming back anyways, this essential skills requirement. What's so different about the North Bend diploma that it makes students and families want to go something? Is it something that's super desirable? You know, are there other, community service components? There's not. There's really nothing in there aside from the essential skills piece. So in those discussions, we kind of evolved into, well, what if we put a policy together that actually was proposed that took out the North Bend diploma, because we're not entirely sure everybody, and I think she and Trace will speak to this a little more in a little more depth, that everybody's really aware of this or what it is, or have the motivation to go out and get this, when in reality they're doing the same thing anyways. You know, so with that, I'll turn it over to and you have an example of what was passed and what is proposed.
We got this together.
Okay. So some of the information that Tracy is handing out here, source is some information straight from the building website, where it talks about the purpose of the Smarter Balance Assessment with the OSAS. And also some information as far as where our juniors last year landed as far as the number of percentages of students who met or where they fell achievement wise on the ELA math and science tests. That's public information. So the requirements as they stand now will be very problematic for us even this year. Okay, so if you look at, for example, math. If you look at math, that is, by the way, those numbers are similar across the board right now. Okay, but if we look at math, so 77% of our juniors last year did not meet or exceed the OSAS math test as far as the requirements. So that would mean, as the policy reads now, 77% of our graduating seniors currently would not qualify for a North Bend diploma. In order to qualify for a North Bend diploma, they would have to submit work samples from all required Oregon tests for math, science, and ELA. This is problematic for us logistically this year for a number of reasons. Okay. First of all, work samples were not being tracked freshman through junior year. Okay, so we do not have record of successful work samples as they work their way through math, through science. Okay, or through ELA. Okay, so we would have to find a way for them to successfully complete work samples this year before graduation in order to do that. Okay. These requirements were not considered when the current schedule and student schedules were being built. So we have students, in order to get the North Bend diploma, would have to submit work samples for math or science who aren't currently enrolled in a math or science class. Okay, to be able to offer those classes. For example, if we got into the second semester to be able to offer those classes, because of the realignment that is taking place, our teachers are tapped out schedules. We're looking at hiring a teacher that would somehow be able to teach coursework and guide students through work samples in math, science, and ELA.
We need 11.
And we would have to make that hire very, very quickly. Yeah. And primarily, I want to point you to that, the document from ODE, people who want us taking the Smarter Balance test. And from ODE, their words specifically, if you look on the back page and highlighted section, it is not intended to be an assessment that places or assesses where kids are. It is to give the district and state data to inform our instructional practices, to inform where we want to improve. Okay, but it is not intended to be a diagnostic test as far as placement for our students in honors programs or anything. And so, the placement of that in the North Bend diploma requirements and also the honors diploma requirement was problematic by ODE standards. Okay, so those are that is the primary reason why it's problematic for us this year. It would be problematic for us in upcoming years for the same reason. Okay, if those numbers hold out, okay, even if we move the needle somewhere, if those numbers hold out, and our juniors, around the same percentage of our juniors need to submit successful work samples to meet that requirement next year. That means next year, as we're forecasting our classes, we're assessing our needs staffing wise. Again, we do not have the capacity to add classes for them to be able to meet those work sample requirements. So we're hiring staff so we can add the classes necessary for them to do that. And Tim's the budget guy. Right here, that's a big ask, you know, as far as being sustainable. So,
These are these costs.
yeah, and the question is, if it becomes a choice, what are we giving up in order to create the space for kids to develop and submit successful work samples? And so that is why it's problematic. Any questions? Yeah.
The first one is, when we first talked about this being asked Dana, how many kids wanted to declare for this week? Is there more about?
I'm not sure of part of any of our kids who actually know the different levels of, other than honors and the regular diploma. I'm not sure how many of our
Yeah,
kids
that's
are.
part of the problem too, is it was just never. Well, I don't think there's a purpose, like, what would be the benefit of getting, I mean, I don't see any benefit to it. Looking at.
And to the north and,
Yeah.
correct. I don't believe it's gonna get them any further in terms of college or jobs or anything like that. I agree with you. I don't believe it's.
So students probably aren't very interested, right?
I don't believe so.
We have some students in the room.
Shiona, do you know what the North Bend diploma is and how?
I don't have the information about that, I believe in, and to be honest. But that basically is the questions that I do have for you, Mr. Brown. You're saying graduates that were juniors last year have to take science and math state test, or so they are not, if they're not enrolled in any of those classes. No,
So what I'm saying is if let's say you took the smart balance test. And then you didn't meet the requirement, make it level 3. In order to meet that requirement, you either have to retake the test the following year. Or you have to be able to be successful, what they call work samples, which demonstrate proficiency at the levels of state.
Even if you already saying that we didn't pass the class, or anything, we still pass.
State test.
Okay, so what if you met the requirements, but you didn't do so well? You said that's like, how does it work out for students who don't have to in the science for that class?
So according to the policy, as it currently reads, you would not qualify for a North Bend diploma or an honors degree. With a 50 standard for.
And that's just what everyone is supposed to. And besides the honors, yeah, I know it's open, but it's just written.
Do you know the percentage of kids are that opt out of state testing,
Yeah.
and how does that affect North Bend High School diploma? Because I didn't even know there was it, as a parent, I didn't know there was a North Bend High School diploma versus a regular Oregon diploma. And I am a parent that has opted my child out of state testing. And so now to go back, and I mean, that's not, I don't think it's well known to the public that there is a different diploma. That's not something I've ever been told, and my child's been in the North Bend School District since 6th grade, and she's a senior this year. So that is something that is not very well communicated to the public.
And this is exactly why we're saying, we're proposing a policy that takes it back.
So
It hasn't been communicated in a way that it's actually of value. Now, I think the vision behind it was of value, you know, the idea that we could potentially create something that people in our community and employers in our community said, wow, this student has a North Bend diploma, this is a fantastic thing. But all the pieces weren't put into place and it wasn't communicated. And if he's only taking an essential skills requirement, that piece that's missing, probably not, because the things we value in the community are are much broader than big tests.
The employers would know what a North Bend diploma is, because my child's modified diploma says North Bend diploma, and employers not gonna know that.
Right. So all of those reasons that you're speaking of, that is exactly why we're asking that it be taken out of that policy. But we are also asking that it be tabled and taken off of the honors one as well, for those same reasons. Just because we have, for example, we had 7 last year who were not able to take the science portion due to something that was kind of out of their control. We do have some in that group who are eligible for honors. There is not work samples for honors because that was not one of the tested areas when work samples were initially developed. We don't have things in place. The students who are eligible, who did not pass their state testing, have not been notified. They don't know that they have to make this up. They may not be in a math class or a science class right now, that they have to finish this and that they have to take that test.
So this proposal also hasn't taken out.
No, and that proposal is still in.
And we do not, we're not saying that. That is not what we're supporting taking the North Bend diploma.
Michelle, you had something to say?
Well, I just wanted to say, when the original vision of the board was, like you're saying, to make it something that people strive to do, but it did not get communicated down to you if you didn't even know about this.
Right.
So there was a good intention in this. However, listening to the workload and so forth, I understand that piece. So
That's
If we
not
took-
something you really anticipate.
yes. But I was just gonna say, but then with the honors, as a board, we talked about, because so many people were opting out of the testing. And it's hard for us to gauge, we need to have results in order to know the district and how we are doing. And so this was a way for us to encourage, especially for honors, we want them to be required. And if they're getting an honors diploma, then they should also be able to take the test and pass the test.
Hold on one second. There's another component of this that I want to add regarding that honors diploma and having that test to be taken. It's that the state is coming through, and we've seen recently the governor has signed in some accountability measures that really are outside of our control. right? But we're gonna be held accountable for them. And if we don't have these students that can pass these tests, take the tests, and show that as a district, we are actually, because our teachers are doing a fantastic job, our students are amazing, and our students are bright. And if we're not showing that, there's this risk of not meeting these requirements for 2 years and having the state actually come in and say, you know what, we're gonna control how you spend 25% of your budget. And that is the last thing that we want, is to lose control over our budget.
But what I think I heard Tracy say is it's that then we'll be able to bid because we did it.
They don't know at this time that they are not eligible at this time, because they may not know that they did not pass the math, English, or the other.
They speak to a larger issue that I have. I want to be transparent with you, I think just discuss what you're saying, just something, as I was preparing for this, there's some things that I saw in the document. Okay. What about the kids who opt out for religious or cultural reasons?
That was my question.
If they're not able to receive an honors diploma.
Yeah.
So if you want to keep that in here.
What I heard you say is we don't.
Well, no, there's another way to do it. You don't have to take the test. You would take the interim assessment, which is a component of the test that we're embedding into classroom instruction in order to also provide instruction.
But is that gonna affect the kids who don't have, because there was having to have the teachers that are gonna teach the course. Does that apply to what you're talking about? Because then that brings in the study issue, or is that?
Assessment without being involved.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So the kids who are unaware that they may not get that. I mean, how, I don't know how to say this, but what was the intention to communicate that to them when these standards were put into place?
That was something that we had not discussed yet this fall. It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a space where we can set these standards up for future, but the kids who fell through the cracks of this, it doesn't affect them, because I don't think it's to kind of punish them for something that they had no control over, but we can do our best to be more, if you want to move forward with it as far as the honor programs go, and I still would like to see a space that for kids for religious reasons, cultural reasons, blah, blah, that they also are allowed to have their honors and not have to kind of sacrifice what they've been brought up in their home space. But then set those very clearly for a future time. I would be more comfortable with that.
Every year, they're gonna still take the test at the same time and not know the results until the same time every year. I don't know what would change.
They have 2 years to do it though. But did they not, or were they not informed that if they don't pass that test, they will not get the honors?
No,
Were they aware of that aspect?
The juniors.
They may not have the results, but that's.
The juniors last year, yes, they were,
Okay.
because I went to all of the classes before they took the test
Okay,
and explained all of the differences. And what was gonna be happening.
okay,
If students were absent that day or not there, they may not have heard. But I did get to all of the junior classes. I did not get to the sophomore.
okay.
Tim, you're saying that we need to have the testing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be part. We need to increase the amount, but it doesn't necessarily have to use it.
Well, with your honors diploma, it makes sense to have it in the diploma track, because there's also the alternative option that exists within that. And this was communicated last year, and the expectations were set for the high school to make.
What's the alternative track versus if you're
That's
doing?
the internal
Yeah.
assessments, which are embedded in.
So you can pass the state assessment, or if for some reason you didn't, you take it the following year,
Mhm.
so or you can pass another alternative assessment,
So-
and we've been using the interim
I just,
assessment.
my issue is, what about kids that don't take tests well? That's what I'm concerned about right now.
Right.
That's what I'm,
And
that's
why the
yeah.
interim assessment is there, more of a performance sample.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, is like,
It's not a fair reflection.
no, because I feel like one test, some kids just have anxiety issues, don't test well.
There's multiple alternative ways
Okay,
to
so
pass.
there is, okay, and, okay, then I. Okay.
And so,
Do they have to pass this test every year? The state test is?
So it's just one time,
Just this year.
just their junior year.
And then they can do it their senior year if they didn't pass it.
If they didn't pass, then they can do it. their senior.
And that's for honors.
But they don't find out until when that they
Right
pass.
after they take the test now, it's within about 2 weeks after they take the test, let know the results.
But these seniors this year don't know the results, and here it is.
They may have gotten it in emails, or I don't know if they can log on to get it. I'm not sure how the seniors are notified. Can you help?
We do not have access to that.
You don't, okay. So that would be some,
The students.
I was told to fly my.
Ways to access that.
I know it last year.
so that would be something then that I need to either print them off, call the students down or something to notify them of their scores.
How did we?
And they just told me.
I think some of the, I think some of the teachers may have been able to pull it up.
Some teachers.
Some teachers. Yeah.
Okay.
I would, but my primary concern is, so we look at the proposed, policy. I believe there should be some language on that specifically states the alternative track. To the honors diploma if they don't do the OSAT, because if we do have kids that opt out for religious or cultural reasons, I believe we're subject to legal challenge. That's my opinion.
We also can approve this proposal, and you guys could come back. and
It does have
us those changes too.
It does have it in here, and it does propose a performance task if they do not pass the test in there. If you remember, I sat through those meetings, as a lot of us did, and we talked honors diploma. We talked about proving that they deserve that level of a diploma, not just 2 more credits. But they needed to prove that they were above and beyond to issue that honors diploma. And one of the things that the board at the time decided was, if they pass that assessment and can prove they passed that assessment, they demonstrate that ability to earn an honors diploma at that point. So other than that, we're saying take 2 more classes and you get an honors diploma. So they wanted to make it a more rigorous requirement than just taking 2 additional classes in there. It is a little more tracking to do, but counselors were aware of that. I've had conversations with the counseling department and with grad coaches that know some of these things at the high school. I'm not sure who's tracking what. I'm not involved in the high school on a daily basis, so I don't know, but I think we could find out pretty easily and come up with a system, because when we're talking honors diploma, we're talking a much smaller portion of the kids than when we're talking making a North Bend diploma available for everybody.
I would
And I
say,
can, sorry, go ahead.
I'm
Ann.
okay with taking, I've been saying the whole time, get rid of the diploma, but I think as far as the honor stuff goes, we're just not to have more information and look at that later, because one, I haven't read the whole thing, but it's never done it. 2, I'd like to know if other districts do they have community service requirements, what do they do for their honors, because like you just said, 2 more classes. But I also really worry about testing, because there are kids that just don't test well, it doesn't necessarily reflect on their intelligence.
The Oregon State assessment, it's, you're measuring all the standards in that particular subject area, whereas the alternative, if you were to not pass it or not take it, took the alternative, it's measuring small, it's not measuring all, it's essentially life and essential skills, which is not passing the broad spectrum standard that was required to take the test. So it's not as rigorous as passing the entire state assessment, but it is something.
Can you expand on the religious and cultural? I've never heard of that, like, what,
You can't.
because
you can't opt out.
they have to take tests in school, like, I don't know what the difference is.
OSAS, they are allowed to opt out for those reasons.
But I mean,
Only in science.
what?
In science, they can, and in the area of science, and it's actually not an exemption in science, it's considered I'm sorry, it's not it's considered an exemption because of the religious.
Okay, but not with math.
No. Correct, they can opt out of those, they can say, I'm not taking those, but in science, the only way that you're not taking that is if you exempt yourself because of a religious or.
Well, if they do, then as.
We would just.
We have to make an exception.
Well, the bottom line is they still, no matter what, qualify for a diploma, an Oregon diploma.
Right.
The testing has nothing to do with that. They qualify to graduate from North.
They don't
Bend
want
High
an
School.
honors program, they don't.
It's just they don't have the honors diploma option.
real quick, to that point, because there are different tests, on the proposed language. I noticed this as I was just kind of reading through it again, before I got up here. On items, 12, 13, and 14, the honors diploma. I believe there should be some language in there that includes all Oregon State assessment tests. By saying just the Oregon assessment test, well, there's actually the requirement to take these tutors, math, ELA, and something. So I would put some language in what that's all.
I believe we're looking at two different motions.
Yeah, no, well, no,
This
that's
is not-
not, I think,
Yeah.
you got a good point here. We came here, I mean, the issue is here was basically we're gonna change it to eliminate the diploma. Now we've morphed into an area about that, and I think we need maybe suggestions, language from staff, so that we can consider those, so at this point. I think we've talked about a little different things, but the focus needs right now to be, are we interested in the current proposal, which would only then, well,
So I think what we would probably do is sit down with the board leadership and the next board meeting, then we could decide whether or not to bring this forward for second reading at the next meeting. It has to be proposed. And is there, aside from the suggestion to add all? That all stuff after that, was there any other from the school board, any other suggested?
The other suggestion would be, for the honors would be community service.
Well, that was my.
I like that.
Honors. I would like to be able to honors.
Yeah,
And so.
I like yours, that's.
I just, and I'm not supposed to talk about that, I think that should be added to June's plan, so then we just wanna make sure we had a timeline on that. so
Yeah,
that-
no, that's fair.
And then
Yeah,
we're
for sure.
doing this.
That wouldn't apply to.
Okay, working.
I also would like more information on how we can track, how all these things that either we are doing or we're talking about, how we can effectively communicate that to the parents and the kids and make sure that the info, like, not just throw it out there, but also double back and make sure that I know that's hard, but I think that's one of the bigger issues here is just trying to make sure the parents and the students and everyone fully understands not only what's required of them, but just understands how all of this works.
Yeah.
I have my oldest daughter is a 9th grader this year, so I'm also learning a lot about high school, and it's a lot. There's a lot to get your head around, so. Yeah, and I would love more information about the alternate to testing for some of those kids with the religion or cultural opting out and just what that looks like, because I just don't know anything about that. Do you guys know about that?
They should start communicating with parents in the junior high to get them ready for high school. There's 7th, 8th grade year and let them know that this are gonna be some requirements if they're trying them on our.
Is there anything like that already happening?
The honors diploma is spelled out in the bulletin, and where else do you guys, when do you start talking about that in freshman Sunday?
I would imagine we start covering that with the 8th graders, when the counselors go over and start talking with them initially about into the high school.
Okay, so it starts like the beginning.
Yeah, it's also in the I know it's all in the handbook too. It's all laid out with the credits and all of that stuff as well.
Let's be real, how many parents right now?
I'm
just trying to remember how to get the.
Yeah. That's the biggest challenge is I think of the high school and probably the other buildings as well that we run into is when you look on the website, the first handbook you see is the North Bend School District. And not everybody realizes that you have to scroll down to see the additional ones for the buildings.
Okay,
I have students come in all the time going, nope, it's not in there. I read the handbook.
right.
Like, well, I bet you read the district one. Nope,
Okay.
I didn't. And they don't realize they have to scroll down.
Okay,
So,
we could.
it is in there and it is something that I know they start talking about pretty early on.
Okay.
I would imagine they talk about it with the 8th graders. But that is something that I will look into with our counselors, just to make sure that they do.
Okay,
And
that's
if they're introducing it early on to say, these are the options, this is what you can expect coming in. And have them start setting goals.
okay, that's wonderful.
And it would be very easy with our new communication system, parents where
I
to
do
just send out a quick 1-pager. you know, hey, but
Yeah.
you know, and just kind of have some simple things with some links to maybe make some directed attention towards that versus
I like that.
expecting to. So,
All right, we're ready to move on?
those are great ones.
So if it's right.
The North Bend, yeah, if the policy stood presented as is for the second reading, it should be removed. Yes.
Maybe add that thing you mentioned.
Right.
Correct.
Needs kind of.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I need a quick synopsis of what they're doing. Is there a vote happening? Is there, okay, so it's a second. Read is what's happening. I just
I'm
wanna.
gonna change, add a one or two there, and then, we'll talk with the school board leadership, and then we'll bring it to the next board meeting. Otherwise, it's as is, and that has the requirement this year for a North Bend diploma that people believe in.
So are we comfortable if we move ahead without the North Bend diploma and move forward with the potential of the honors and start working with those students? Are we comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't lose more time.
Yeah,
Okay,
I like that.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. There's also some credit changes that existed in the proposed policy, because this one also addresses the semester requirement and the number of credits that are required versus the trimester, which is a whole nother set of credits. So this puts us back in line with what's happening elsewhere in the state and the number of credits. So we do need to update the number of credits in this policy.
And that's in the proposed.
That is in the proposed year.
All right, next item, graduation caps and boards discussion.
Well, me just jump in.
Yeah. What is the current policy?
So, the policy is laid out, so this is the graduation agreement that, all seniors have to sign in order to graduate. This is the current page out of our student handbook.
Yeah.
It's outlined as this.
Yeah, because that's like not, anybody else in Canada, we do have special copies if you
I
would.
already have this one, actually.
Oh, yeah, we already have this one. Did I already?
Oh, did I hand that one out twice?
Michelle gave that.
Sorry, Michelle.
Oh,
I don't think I have this, but I don't have the graduation.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Well, I guess we got two.
And so, would anybody else like? All right, I'll take the, all right. Also, would you like to graduation agreement for your hand? All right.
What brought us to this, is a discussion about, initially it was about boards. In the past, we were very limited to back boards people could wear. I'm looking at the,
Well, that was just limited in the last few years, because a few years ago, they had.
In the graduation years of 21, 22, and 23, those were the only 3 years that they had the additional course. Other than
and why
that,
did this stop?
it's clubs. We kept, after that, it went back to what it traditionally had been in the district, which was academic based.
It just limited to academic. I'm looking at the list that we were given from that Marshfield, Gooseberry School District allows, and it's quite a bit larger than what we are, that we allow. And I don't know, I'm just thinking that it's not our graduation, it's their graduation, as I understand it, when it's the clubs and the groups which decide whether they want to for it, and then make the arrangements. School districts, the budget.
Because I actually pretty much like, I got that before I realized Michelle, I got that from Eli earlier today myself.
Okay,
The principal over at Marshall Center. And what I do appreciate about that if you are gonna have a conversation about expanding the reports. My recommendation would be to do something like Marshfield does. Not every club gets a core. If you look at that, they're all academic based.
Okay.
Okay, there is a specific requirement. So for example, they have a core for social studies, which meant you took 4 years of social studies. Or science, where you met certain achievement levels in the area of science and math. A trio was on, which is college and career readiness, that where they've completed a certain number of steps that are preparing them for college. Before your career. They are all academic based, they exempt non-academic clubs. So for example, our fishing fund. I'm as big a fisherman as anybody in this room, I guarantee it. I would not have a court for the fishing. For the Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Okay? These are all academic based clubs, so if the conversation does swing towards maybe expanding. What students are able to display as far as their involvement. I would highly recommend we adopt something very similar to that. Which is where it's still academic based, but maybe expands the, I guess, level of recognition for the variety of things that you've been involved with.
I understand that, sure, opinion, I have a different opinion. There are kids in this district who will have a, who will be wearing, well, they'll be values, or they'll be going to college, or whatever it is. There are kids in school who maybe will spend 4 years of Dungeons and Dragons, and they work hard and they get a recommended, well, not Dungeons and Dragons, into that, not word, it's their.
Yeah.
I think words for all kids, if they learn it, it's in club and, well, I'm in club, and it's been perfect. That's my opinion, but I'm just like the unknown.
I had a similar track as Anna. I understand the importance of having it academically based. And, that's. Maybe there could be ways. With Dungeons and Dragons or whatever it is that we can find some kind of an academic twist. But all kids shine and excel in different ways. And when you build that confidence in their high school years of like. I wasn't a mathematician. I barely passed my math classes. I didn't start making good grades in math till I was in college. Don't know why. But if they had let, I was in lacrosse club because it wasn't a sanctioned sport in high school. Well, it took us tooth and nail to just to fight to get a letterman's jacket and to get some kind of recognition. But like, I was really good at lacrosse. I was good at arts. I was good at my classes. I did okay. But when I got to college, it was the confidence from those things that I think fueled my academics, because I went from being a CD student to being an AB student in college. And so I think there's a way we can kind of meet in the middle. And because I would like to see kids shining and feeling happy about, because not everyone grows up and their career gets to be the thing that also completely fulfills them. But for some people, it's what fulfills them the most is outside of their job. So I don't know. I would like to find more ways to celebrate them.
Like, as an example, what if they're in culinary and that's gonna be their employment? That
Maybe you write a
Well,
Dungeons and Dragons.
I think,
book.
well,
Culinary is on there.
There is-
As far as the article bottle, it is on.
so here's the other thing I would say, where I see ones that don't really seem academic space, I see a community service component.
Which I love that.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
think that
something.
that is,
Yeah.
that is like, a good addition to, there's either volunteer hours or community service or some sort of thing where you're benefiting all, and so that might be a way to bridge the
Yeah.
gap.
Yeah, well,
There's
like,
lots of ways to do that.
oh, totally. And like, just because we've been talking about Dungeons and Dragons and I happen to like that. It'd be fun if there's a high school club that has a Dungeons and Dragons club, whatever. If there was a way that they could teach middle school kids how to play and have a fun little kid campaign, and they're serving those kids in the communities, teaching them new skills, teaching them how to do fun things, because that's problem solving, that's working together, that's all the things, so, I would love to see the older kids guiding in the younger kids, because I think it gives the older kids a lot of confidence, but I think it binds the community together a lot when you have the older kids serving the younger kids when it seems appropriate.
And to all of the clubs and staff advisors that are in charge of the club or activity.
Every school sponsored club must have an.
So why could it be that we just say yes to caps and leave the discretion up to staff that work with instruments or the order not, since we don't know what the clubs do or any effort put into it, would that just be too great?
So,
I think that was a little bit of a calculation.
yeah, and I was thinking the next part of the discussion, I am much more apt to go core route. Starts my recommendation and keep the caps, and I have the reasons for that. But I'd be much more apt to discuss the board option, where again, you put it on the club to decide what their criteria is for earning the code from their club.
So it's not just any person that's.
That's what I'm saying, like, I
Exactly.
showed up for the last meeting and I get it for it, but like, it says.
Yeah, that would be required.
I would ask the clubs to have it in their charter, their rules, their bylaws, to decide if you want a cord from this club, what the participation level has to be. The clubs would be responsible for paying for those cords as well, so it's not something that's expensive falls on the student district. And decide, and have the club decide who wears those, at graduation.
Yeah.
Okay. It could be attendance based too, for the help with attendance,
That
with their clubs.
You know, there's one other thing too, that Mr. Brown and I had talked about that came up in a previous discussion. That I think brings even more kids into it, and that is having an NBHS school. That all the kids can have, that they can put their letterman pins on, they can put their club pins on, they can put their academic pins on, they can have a fishing club pin, they can have a Dungeons and Dragons pin that they have earned, and they can wear them at graduation, and everybody can have a stole. And so that way, because I'm just gonna pick on our current sports, okay, volleyball doesn't have a court. Football doesn't have a court, and I'm just gonna say, and I'm just gonna pick on the team, I don't think we want football players showing up in their pads to graduation. I don't think we do. But if we had the stoles, we could do a full NBHS at the bottom, they could put their lettering pins for how many years they lettered them.
But you guys talk about budget, who's paying for all those?
The club,
The club would be able to.
The club has to buy each individual child. Did you say everybody at graduation has one, or
We could-
just the
you would
kids that?
provide the stall.
We would provide.
You provide the stole,
Yeah.
which, what's the cost of that, out of curiosity, any idea?
We haven't looked at that yet, but it's something that. we
So
will-
every child that's graduating is wearing one of those?
If they would like one,
If they don't have any kids, it's.
yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, then that's gonna be oddball out, you're not gonna be
Well, I mean, if,
looking the same, or whatever your look is that you're going for at graduation without wearing all the cords, if there's kids that are wearing some and some that aren't.
well, it's up to the child if they don't want.
Oh,
it, they don't.
It's up to the child.
Yeah, they don't have to earn it.
They don't have
Everyone gets the option.
Everybody gets the option to
Yeah,
have it, okay.
but if they,
At no cost to them.
okay, they're not gonna get charged for the stole.
Oh,
But if their group, whether it's a team or whether it's a club, wants to do a pin and they have their criteria set. Then it's not an issue of who has what colored cord. They can have their pins and then they can put them on there however they want to. And they can display those at graduation, crossing the stage and doing all of that.
can I ask where you found that idea? Do other schools in Oregon do that?
No,
Or is
that
it
was
a lot?
just a giant brainstorm session that just kind of evolved.
I'm just curious what it looks like, and cause that's what those are schools do. Okay.
So basically,
Universities also decorate their staff with that next conversation, but so we're comparing that.
I think that's a great option. I would like.
So, and if that is an option that, a direction that we wanna go, the group that does our. Caps and gowns. Might be able to, but we would have to get on that right away with the clubs. Figure out what it's.
I would be
But-
interested in some feedback, even just from the clubs themselves.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
it might be
kids.
hard to do a whole, school-wide thing, but I would want feedback versus pens versus cords.
see how
Because
much-
honestly, me, I don't care. I mean, what do they want?
Yeah.
So I'd be very interested in that.
Yeah, I would love to hear what the kids have to say. Cause I would love pins. I would have all the pins that I could have. But yeah, some kids are like, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah, a pen would kind of be cooler than a cord in a way, but so I'd like to know what they would, I'd like to know their thoughts on it, even if it's just the clubs, that you kind of surveyed.
Well, it expands into sports too.
Or sports, that's what I mean. I mean, like, but the people that be providing it, the sports versus pens, what are they thinking? And
So we're talking pins instead of cords,
For those things.
for those.
But
It's still like floating ideas and get feedback.
So you can still do those.
The honors course would still be there, that's a separate policy.
Okay.
when pins were discussed, one of the things that was mentioned was. What are you more likely to keep over a
Yes,
period of
yeah.
time? And the pin would signify something, and it's been a small spot that it would remind you of what you learned your time in high school, and it would be with you. For as long as.
I still have my other cross pin.
But I mean, that
I
makes
love
more
it.
sense to me, but I still would want a little input from the.
Yeah.
When I graduated from Northland High School, they gave me a bulldog pin. It
Mhm.
was a little bulldog.
Mhm.
I keep it and I wear it on my sports coat, when I wear my sports coat to this
Yeah.
day. And I graduated in 1976, so pins do make a difference.
Yeah. I think it's great again.
Share the point. Any thoughts from students?
As for the stat, or what are they called?
The souls.
The schools, I wouldn't have an issue with that. I mean, I wouldn't mind decorating the stone, but again, that goes back, that's like half conversation, that's hopefully talk about that next. I don't have an issue with that, I wouldn't mind wearing that.
With your want boards, or there's a cord, what would you prefer, a pin or?
Well, as a student who doesn't participate in any of the boards that are listed, like Z Club, Fire Band, I wouldn't be doing anything else, like, I wouldn't even mind it being those things, like, you know, but that's just me personally.
But if you did participate in something, like you're gonna go into the.
I would, yeah, I would,
Would you wanna wear a nursing pin?
yeah, I would,
You have a job nursing now, so would you be able to wear like a nursing pin?
yeah, I would, I
Yourself,
felt
pretty
pretty amazing.
Doesn't.
That's already benefiting what we don't
Yeah.
have, so I think that that's great.
Well, that's a potential direction from academic boards and potentially stole things.
Yeah, I wanna see
Oh, that.
if the kids get excited about
Yeah,
that.
I don't care for that.
I wanna see if the students get excited about that. If they like don't care, then it may not be worth all the effort, but if they get really hyped about it, then it'd be worth the effort.
Well, just from talking to my kids, they're a little missed that they can't wear boards and different things like that, but if they can wear a pin, you know, you can have academic boards, but a pin for soccer, whatever else they're involved in, I think that'd be good. I think that it's sort of a good middle ground, and I think with a stole, pins on it, you know, a couple cords or whatever.
It looked nice.
And board meeting, use always if it's, you know, it's a open price to get, use that when you. And stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can look at it.
And the athletes normally get their pins when they play sports,
do.
so that's a pin
Yeah.
that they don't have to purchase, do they correct?
No.
That, if they would already have, they would already have their soccer, ball, whatever pin that they have, yeah.
My kids must be constantly, you know, just bored because pennies is.
That's.
His poster.
Let's see.
Serious, oh my God. Oh, yeah, let's talk about that.
I'm talking about hats.
So as far as caps, my concern with the decorating caps is as soon as we open it up to allow a personal message on a cap, with the idea that somebody from the district will decide if something is offensive or not because they qualify. We immediately open the door to a First Amendment issue. Because at what point does somebody challenge us and say, you're challenging my First Amendment rights? And the potential, I believe the caps have more of a potential to divide our community rather than unite our community in celebration of our graduates. We will have people on both sides of the spectrum, political spectrum, in our audience. And is a MAGA message offensive to someone? Is a pro LGBTQ plus message offensive to people maybe on the far right? We have a hunting and fishing culture here. So if somebody has something like that on their cap and it's offensive to somebody who's dedicated to animal rights and wants to be a penal. It has more of the potential for dividing our community is far greater than uniting for a common celebration of our graduates. That is my primary concern.
I like the idea of just keeping the decorations, whether hat or stole, to school oriented, to school clubs.
Yes, be related to something.
It keep the theme related to school, whether we decorate the caps or whether we decorate like the stoles, we should, I mean, if we're gonna open that up. It should stay school oriented, because that's what we're here for, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just want to point out, you mentioned that opens the door to people who are LGBT. clubs and whatever they may be, we have clubs that advertise everything about that. So if that's not, if that's opening a door, have those clubs been attacked? That's my question.
Yes, they have.
Have you had any complaints about the GSA being attacked?
Yes,
So you still have those clubs in the
Yeah.
school?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so
they've had their banners ripped
So that
down,
would be school related to celebrate it on their cap.
but
This is
again,
a club at the school.
what we're doing is we're kicking the door open again for an issue that could divide. We rather unite for one night. This is our opportunity to come together as one night and not as a united community to just celebrate our North Bend graduates.
Why wouldn't those clubs divide the community?
I don't think clubs have the same potential problem. I mean, I understand where he's coming from when we.
Clubs are in school.
It's, and I mean, can you limit it to non-political, non-offensive? But then who's to say what's offensive?
Yeah, so who makes that call?
Yep.
If we get a student who shows up with their cap, even though we said it can't have this, and they have it. We create confidence,
Yeah.
the night of graduation.
Well,
I feel like these kids were, this is their night, this is their night to celebrate them. And if they show up and they've got, you know, something on their hat that really is offensive, that's an actual consequence that shouldn't be there. We can put things in place where they have to get it approved a few weeks ahead of time. There's all kinds of stuff we could do, but.
But again,
What's offensive?
we decide what's offensive.
Isn't there already, in the handbook, as far as what kids can wear on their shirts, what's deemed appropriate, graphics, blah, 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 can those same rules just apply?
They could apply, but for example,
Mhm.
what is not in our dress code. So in our dress code, you can't advertise alcohol, beverages, drugs, things like that. You can't have hate messages,
Mhm.
okay? But if a kid shows up with a message that's pro such and such group, we do not send them home.
Someone could interpretate it,
Yeah.
interpret.
We
So
don't,
I guess here's my question. I'll be honest, when I first read that, I was like, oh, I'll let them decorate it. Like I want to, but. You know, my eldest daughter is homeschooled now because of a little bit of some bullying because she belongs to the LGBT community. It does happen. And I also have to balance that part of be proud of who you are, but be safe because I don't want you to get hurt. So. I mean, I don't, and there is a lot in the political climate right now. It is feels a little scarier than normal for some people. Is there a space? I know we don't have a lot of time necessarily to brainstorm ideas of how. We could try to come up with some ways and maybe some rules to let the kids, even maybe if it's just a little bit, like. You could have a small corner. It can't have political messaging. It has to represent your club. It has to represent your sport. It has to. Something like that, or are we on a time crunch where there's not time to kind of brainstorm a little bit further?
so the question I think one came up discussion will came in session, where I would continue to sort of express my concern.
And I think your concern is valid. and
Is
fair.
if somebody comes forward with some, and Ms. Wing and I say, that's not appropriate, and they wanna take that up a level.
Yeah,
Who does that go to?
so if they have pins that represent their clubs and stuff. Is there less a concern about those potential messages? Because I guess the pins are being handed from a teacher to the student. And we already know that's okay versus them just showing up and we don't know what they're showing up with. And then, or if we got them,
Yeah.
well, okay, I do see your point, but you know, I also want this kids to, because it's always gonna be just like that one or two kid that tries to push it too far. I don't want it to run through all the other kids who just wanna make it
But
cute.
there is legal precedent for things like this being challenged on First Amendment basis.
Okay,
And the current trend legally is that complainant will win.
I came to a
You-
soccer
you-
game and there was a parent out there with a shirt on that was offensive. And guess what? I dealt with it. Like, it's public. They're gonna see that in society. It's there tonight. I don't know why.
And most of them are 18. A lot of them are already 18 and making choices.
And I wanna point out Anna's comment, it's real world problems, like you can go to the grocery store and get targeted for being. Your race, your cup, like all the different things in the world, it's a real world problem, and if 18-year-old students can't handle that for one night, then become bigger issues then.
and I guess if there's verbal fights or physical fights and they have to leave.
But at the same
I mean,
time-
that's where it would escalate to.
Go down into the gym to receive the rest of our diplomas, because you'll fully get your diploma when you walk the stage, you don't just get to walk out and be done, you have to go through, and if a student were to make a comment, then you guys are holding that already. And I wanna thank Ms. Calhill and Hale for making some really valid points, because we should be able to celebrate our volunteering hours. We have a life outside of high school, like our high school doesn't revolve around going to school and going home. Like, we have activities outside of it that I think that we should be able to show, and how I spent the last 4 years of my life, like, this is it on a cap. And I don't think that it's fair. I just met Mr. Brown this year, and he's deciding if I get to celebrate my 4 years the way. I don't think that that's fair at all. And I've known Miss Lang for 2 years now. I don't think that it's appropriate that they get to decide how we celebrate our caps. Like, if obviously school appropriate, I'm not saying coming with like hate, and I mean, we wanna, if graduation is exciting. We work hard for this moment, we work really hard to get where we are now. I don't think that it's fair that we just get to be told that we don't get to decorate our caps.
What kind of decorations are we talking about? I guess I never decorated my cap, so I just don't even know.
No, yeah.
What does it look like? What are we
I
talking
have
about?
a friend who decorated her cap, and she put like something in Spanish. It was like, for my parents who came with nothing and they gave me everything. I think that's a super cute.
So it's like inspirational, like it's more like that sort
Well,
of
like,
thing.
people, like, I don't know, people like to put out their caps, they like to make their, I don't know what they call that, like, the logos or whatever they call the mascots, like, somebody did out, like, a lion, like, since that was their college university, but they're going to mascot. Like, I think that I'm not disagreeing with them at all, like, I do get that, especially with students and kids now in this age, like, there is a bunch of hate in the school, but it's a real world problem. It's not a high school, you know, it's not only high school. I don't think that we should be affected because of something that's going on in the world. And based on what's posted on social media, kids are influenced by that every day.
What,
But
what if we
the things
required
that
them
we
to
do-
turn, anyone who wanted to decorate their cap had to turn it in a week early? Like something like that, like,
Because we're back to the same place we were before, of who's deciding what's offensive and what's
it-
not,
well-
and it's the first time with Brian.
well,
But one of the things that I think we need to follow through with, which is a great point, most of the kids on the floor are 18. And as adults, you gotta realize sometimes there's rules you have to follow whether you like them or not.
yes, that's,
I can say real quick, first of all,
Mhm.
first thing I want to say. Hope all of our graduates are as well spoken as you do.
yeah,
Graduate,
I'm so happy you guys are here.
so very, very, very well said. I respectfully disagree with some of your points, but very well said.
Thank you.
To the point, what we're talking about is all this conflict resolution, how we resolve all these different conflicts. Which is not, there is no conflict if we stick with what we're doing, but we're not creating a conflict by allowing this.
Is there been past conflicts? Like, do we have history where we're concerned about? Because one of my thoughts is too, is I think some of the dumbest decisions are made spur of the moment. And so part of it is that if you have to turn them in a week ahead of time, I think there's a less likelihood that there's going to be a lot of offensive things that are turned in, or if it's even more than that. And before I'd make a decision, I know there's a lot changing in schools with First Amendment rights and everything. And I would want to talk to our legal counsel about it. I mean, I definitely would want to investigate that further and kind of see where we are, what the rules are, because what you bring up, I understand that can be an issue. And I want to know how we deal with it, but at the same time, I would like to, something as simple as, just a cap decoration and maybe the nodding clubs, it sounds nice, inspirational messages, having a bit of you that's unique. I mean, I like the idea of that, but I also understand the pitfalls. I'd want to know a little bit more about that and then try and figure out a way that it might, work.
Is this new to North Bend High School? Have they been allowed to decorate their caps in the past?
So in 20
There were 2 years that they were allowed to decorate caps, and that was number one was in 2020 during the graduation. And the other one was the class of 21 where it was raining on the field.
Oh,
Those were the only 2 years,
And what,
that's what I heard in the.
and did any major issues or conflict arise out of those 2 years?
There, one other time.
Hi, Daryl.
I was told it was just those.
You're hiding back there.
Daryl would know.
I really would love to. Really love being.
I was gonna be following you anyway.
So I will say this was an issue every year at North Bend High School.
Okay.
Which I was there, because starting with graduating class of 2019, they all wanted to, well, the public started anything. Kids wanted to express themselves. And it became quite contentious because there was a significant issue on our school community with education. No, tradition, we're not gonna be. We have this meeting with the seniors and Steve Drive, who's intended, not wanting to be a dictator at the time and everything, but a district leadership at that time, so we have this tradition. It's the older student, the tradition, I have never felt. I guess more guilty for not honoring my students. But they have presented really solid arguments in why, but at the same time, I know, you know, we're just making decisions, the board is leadership, and we stick with it. And one of the reasons that we were at that time, pulling back from supporting the council because this, while we support certain. So that was problematic. So then in 2020, we worked with our kids to have a favorite.
Okay.
Yes, that was 2020. But, you know, kids were able to decorate. You know, 2022, we turned on camp soon. So the kids turned their zero. Were there kids who had painted obscenities on some gifts? Yep, but that was to totally get my gift. And then pull out the caps. And read 2023, same thing. The kids turned their caps in they reviewed. I think there were kids that actually lost their caps, and so we always keep extra kids. And so we're going to. There was, I understand the concerns of you make somebody, you know, whatever.
It's just about, do they act on their anger? That's
Nobody.
it's okay if it makes somebody mad.
There was
Are
that,
they gonna
and
act?
those were years where there were some really contentious issues. So about, you know, civil rights going on in school. And there was zero to graduation. Nevertheless, you know, Shane's on something. You guys have to make a decision that's around kids. And I'm just saying, during those 3 years, 4 years, where kid, because where kids were able to have moving counts. It seemed to be something that added value to their graduation. And if there's an opportunity to add value to their graduation, it's their graduation.
That's helpful.
I'd like to find out, similar to what Megan's talking about, is what limitations can we put on? I think maybe asking our council to look into that. I think because ideally, in my mind, if we're gonna do that, we might have some, obviously nothing offensive. And I understand, you know, that's, that's subjective and non-political.
Content neutral, we
You
can
know,
do
if you
it.
put those
Yeah.
frameworks, can we
You know,
put
that
those
has to
frameworks
be
on there?
more than an inch.
And if so, not that we control that liability exposure to that.
You know, I've had 2 kids graduate here already, I have 2 more to come. They graduated in 22 and 24, so one of them has a cap decorated on the wall. I'm not, the caps, I'm not worried about, you know, both of those graduations, I watch 100 kids out there smoking cigars on our turf. And I was worried about our soccer players' turf. So we have bigger things to worry about, really, because I guarantee you there's gonna be some cigars getting smoked out there.
Well, maybe we can work on it more on our side and come up with some ideas and help out. Maybe you can go back to the students and brainstorm, like, if we wanna do this, how can we, what are some things that we can do to kind of show them that we're serious and we'll do this the right way, and then that's a good way for us to maybe meet in the middle a little bit.
It's like, okay, I don't understand the cigar, like, I know most of our class doesn't understand it either, like, there's going to be maybe 10% of students who will be out there smoking a cigar. And that's a bigger issue, like, just like they were saying, like, that's a whole other topic. We're talking about decorating our caps to represent ourselves. Like, I bet some of the students who represent themselves, like the other students didn't know, like, I bet a lot of students don't know that I'm trying to be a nurse. I'm taking everything I can do. I have a job, like, I'm trying to, that's like, if that would be my way of expressing myself, as an expression, and that would be obviously school appropriate, I want to show that on my cap. It's not just about high school, it really isn't, it's about your accomplishments that you're going to accomplish later in life, and what you do and how you accomplish that, whether that be 4 years or after. Another thing I wanna point out is, high school is hard. High school is so hard, and that can be one little like dip in the water of how like motivating that would be, how much more motivated I would be to go to class, to want to go to graduation, to want to graduate. I would be 100 times more motivated to do that, to graduate with straight A's, do whatever I can do to decorate my cap. I promise you, I'm not the best, and I'm gonna be so honest, I'm not the best at showing up. But if you're gonna sit there and you guys are gonna tell me that I can decorate my caps if I go to class and I graduate with great grades, I will be more than happy to be more motivated to go to class, knowing that I can decorate my cap when I walk that stage.
I think we're willing to think about it, and I think Megan's idea is great, I think we need to talk to our attorney.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we need some
take it
safety
from there.
guards and, you know.
Ongoing discussion.
I would not mind putting my cap in, just so you guys can, I don't care who has to go, to whoever
Yeah.
wants to approve it.
And would that
My
take
goodness.
some pressure off of whoever used to have to approve the caps? I don't know what the board's role could be in that, but maybe we did to the policy. So we can put the policy in, but make sure it doesn't, all the burden doesn't go to one.
Yes.
You know, like try to spread it out, so not one person's having to do it all. But again, that's only volunteers.
So I do wanna jump in and provide some guidance here. I think that there's some excellent arguments on both sides. I think ultimately, from my own perspective, it is honestly a student day, but that doesn't mean that it can just be a free for. I think that we can put some guidelines in place that create some of the safety nets that we wanna see. I think if if, you know, like you said, the rules are in place, right, regarding offensive things that are gonna cause problems. If we have a timeline in place, we can obviously take those off the table. Nope, it's not approved. That provides parents with the opportunity to then appeal that decision, you know, through a normal PL process like they normally would for anything else. And we have a couple weeks to try to resolve that situation. In terms of making the decision, we don't have to make it tonight, but I do think that we should have student voice involved. I'd like to see student council leadership involved. I'd like to see us come back to have a discussion with the board with, and let's put some of these problem solving issues in the students' hands, so that way they can take some ownership in how they can make sure that we're not gonna be faced with all of the problems in that graduation.
That's right.
We can do that. For the next, I mean, when we go, because I wouldn't want to have them much case this issue with debt students, because that's a time.
I think we're hearing two different things here. I mean, that thing of schools, I think, you know, let's get a hold of the soul and see what that looks like. I think that'll be an easy one to get a hold of.
If it issue of budget, we provide our own decorations for our own cap. If that can save the school some money, so be it. We can decorate our caps, and that's another way to benefit the school and save some money. Like, obviously, we can provide our own materials for everything, and I really appreciate, Mr. Johnson saying, what he said. And if that was, like I said, it just goes back to saving money. Like, I know that's a big issue right now. So why are we gonna put our school in more financial burden with something that we can provide ourselves?
On the stall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Depending on, I don't know how much they cost,
Well,
but
we'll
I'm saying that's.
We'll find out how much they cost, because we will be asking the club then to come up with the money for the actual pin, you know, there'll be some fundraising pieces of that, so we wouldn't want to put too much burden on families, you know, we'd like to make sure everybody has, but that's, I think that's a valid point too, let's find out how much those cost. That's one discussion, and then I think if we can, get some student voice involved in that discussion, and then I would say probably another work session topic will be appropriate, to then maybe bring some more voices to the table and kind of get a broader perspective. And right now, you have a policy there and it doesn't include the asset caps, you know, it is the board's discretion to bring policy to the table, so. Is that something we want to put there? I don't think that this is something that needs to be controlled by policy. I think it's something that really we should just have the students help us put some priorities in place, and I think we can have a successful graduation where everybody's honored and everybody's respected.
Right.
All right,
I have a quick question. Is the work session and the meetings open to public, right?
yes.
So are they put in the announcements for the students and parents to see?
What's that? Which part?
So the work sessions and the meetings
Yeah.
that the board has, are those put into the announcements for parents to see and be invited to?
They're publicly posted on our website. We send information out, through the.
Calendar.
It's on the calendar. I'm not quite sure if it's in the announcements for the high school.
Okay, so most parents probably read the announcements. So quite a few of them would read the announcements versus going to the district website to find out when the next meeting is. Is that something that can be fit in for students?
Heard Square, I got like a notice of this one.
Oh, I did not.
You signed up, you know, if you're signed up for that.
I am, I get their attendance rate every day, so.
See, and I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for. Right now, because I would.
I got like 2 days ago. Yeah, I did too, yeah.
Yeah, the students had no idea. I reached out to some students, and they have no idea either.
So some of
To get that
got
information
it.
to them to come, they could even have more people coming, if there was another way of getting information, communicate with them too.
And we also have student reps that come to our board meetings too. You know who your student reps are? Is it Eli and then he's like barrier.
They very,
Ray was
they very the leadership and leadership. plan.
Sure, and the same too.
But all work sessions are not like this. Just-
No, yeah,
just
you have
so-
other ones, yeah.
They're usually in a small room.
Pretty mundane.
It does sound like they're going on a flash alert though, not parents.
Oh, that's like
Stick it on parents for it, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get more people involved and know what's going on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great, I think the board would love that.
All right, let's move on to the next item. Elementary school reconfiguration, K2, K3 to 12.
And then you break.
One break, anybody want
This is only five.
This is with one.
Go ahead, first one. All right.
Reese, these are people, I know.
I was like, let's stretch, yeah, I want to stretch my legs for it.
All right, now, we know it?
Yeah.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna go through, you guys wanna go through this? This presentation? Well, I can go through this and we can come back to another work session. We have people that have states.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's do it. Hold on, wait, hold on. I already need to hear it.
What's the audience?
Now, let's just,
Let's
let's go
do
ahead,
it, let's do it.
This is, elementary school reconfiguration.
Can we present? Yeah. I thought I was on focus for this, and we had lots of robust conversations that got my mind going lots of different directions this evening. But one direction that we will stay focused on is what's best for students and what's best for our community. One thing that has come up a discussion last year during strategic planning was the concept of reconfiguring our elementary schools and creating a K2 elementary school and a 3 through 5 intermediate school. This is something that has happened in other parts of Oregon, and I was out back just speaking to the superintendent in Estacada yesterday. And they're actually going through the same process. Next school year, they will be implementing this process. They are taking their 2 elementary schools that were both K5s, and they are now making them K2 and K5. Their problem, the reasoning is the opposite of ours. They're growing at an exponential rate in their elementary schools. Each of their elementary schools have more students than their high school has. And that's because so many people are moving there. It's the fastest growing area of Oregon right now. But when I was talking to the superintendent, the reason that we want to do it is also the very valid reason, and the reason we're considering it. First of all, we want to talk about the objective of aligning instruction by developmental stages and balancing enrollment. And again, it came through from our strategic planning slide. And it was on 2 teams. It came up in the core planning team and the instructional planning team. There. Our enrollment trends do suggest an opportunity for realignment. As we see declining enrollment in both of our elementary schools and perhaps a little bit more significantly in North Bay. We could potentially see an issue where we end up with singletons again in North Bay. That creates a hard situation when it comes to planning, balancing classes, multiple things, balancing behaviors, IEPs and whatnot. Reconfiguration could better align our instructional focus by the age groups. We also see that in the near future, we're going to have some housing come in. Low income housing in the Hillcrest zone that will greatly impact Hillcrest. Because that's where it's zoned. And by not having zones, potentially, we eliminate all of those types of conflicts. You know, it gives us the opportunity to address our declining enrollment and also gives us the scalability to address an ever increasing enrollment, which I believe will happen in the next 3 to 5 years. Okay. So when we talk about, presenting this evening, we really wanted to evaluate some of the benefits and challenges and determine next steps, really get the board's consensus on where are we going with this. This is something we want to continue to look at this year. We want to hear from staff if possible, parents, and of course, we would do more outreach to larger groups, but we need to start somewhere. Go ahead. Some educational rationale, strengthen early learning and foundational literacy. We know early literacy is a major focus in Oregon. It's becoming something that we will continue to have to put our efforts into, and as we should. It also aligns perfectly with our strategic plan, which has an early foundation skills component in early literacy, math, and social emotional learning. It supports academic depth and independence in Pre-5. And it would improve grade level collaboration and curriculum continuity amongst those grade levels. We could potentially target professional development by the grade bands. The schools themselves would have professional development provided to specific needs of those grade bands. Create some more opportunity for greater collaboration among same grade level teachers, concentration in early intervention for literacy and numeracy, consistent expectations, instructional practices amongst grade bands. Because these students ultimately end up going to the same middle school, the same high school, so we would see a lot of that consistency be created by bringing students together. Administrative support during PLCs would increase because right now you have an administrator who's trying to get potentially to kindergarten through 5th grade classrooms, which is impossible on any given Friday. However, getting from K1-2 would be much more manageable. And also the administrator could be focused on these things. Instructional coaches, again, aligned to the actual grade of school, grade of the school. Balancing enrollment between the buildings is a big one that we talked about really most recently. And you know, a perfect example is 4th grade at Hillcrest, 4th grade at North Bay. When we're seeing numbers of 31 at Hillcrest, maybe 24, 25 at North Bay, there's a big discrepancy between the teachers and what it is they're asked to do. You know, and that can happen in any given year. You know, and seeing maybe 2 or 3 difference is very common, but sometimes these anomalies happen, and that's a big discrepancy. So, you know, all the teachers care, they're going to try to do the best for each and every student, but you know, they also know that perhaps a colleague is not having to do as many report cards, as many conferences, monitor as many students, and that's an additional piece of stress to them. And so this would balance that. If you had all the 4th grade together in one building, you certainly would have the same size classes. You'd be able to balance the IEPs and students with IEPs, special education students between classrooms. You'd be able to provide more opportunities for life skills students to be mainstream amongst more teachers versus a small number of teachers. So that teachers don't necessarily carry the load for all the students that are in that grade level. Another thing, you know, we talk about is like, if you think about 1st grade at both schools, you have about 50 kids in each school. So there's 2 teachers per school. That's 25 students. Adding a 3rd teacher to both schools, it's a huge burden on our finances. It takes the numbers really low. And it's not sustainable. But if you take 50 and put them together, adding a 5th teacher is something that could be sustained and takes the numbers to 20. And it's fair for both schools. So I mean, because it would all be one school. So that would be a reason for that as well. It gives us more flexibility when it comes to adding a teacher than we currently have between 2 buildings when they're set. So it's ensuring that balanced class size would be and looking at potential benefits of this review. Maybe clarify building identities again, what we're again to focused on, potentially enhancing transitions to the middle school. Reduces future impacts of the new housing and eliminates the need to zone, rezone and. Depending on what happens, obviously, we have a housing. Track going up now, that's gonna impact Hillcrest greatly. If the shipping container port were to come in, you know, there you could see pockets of housing popping up throughout the area. And how that impacts schools with the current zones is an issue. We might find ourselves rezoning every couple of years. If in here, you wouldn't have a rezoning issue at all. You would just be saying K2, 3 keep both full operational full. One thing that we worry about is when you look at Hillcrest, when it was at its highest numbers. North Bay at its lowest. We're down to where we potentially might need just one teacher per grade level. Is it operationally efficient to keep the entire building open? We don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we're asking ourselves that question. We want to keep both those buildings open. So having that specific grade bands between the buildings to ensure that happens. If we continue to see a decline in our enrollment over the next 3 to 5 years while we're waiting for that port to be built. So quite a few things there to consider benefit wise. Challenges, I think, are obvious. There's another transition. You know, we have students now making another transition after second grade. So something we want to consider, what does that transition look like? You know, how are we going to support it? How are we going to create that bridge between second to third, if they're going to a new school? Families with siblings in multiple schools, you could potentially have a child in 4 schools, you know, depending on the age range of the children. And so, how does that impact the families with that many children in different schools? Family convenience factors are something that comes into play when you have kids in multiple schools. And so, you know, bridge phobia is a real thing. You know, some people don't want their kids going over the bridge, and so how would we address that? What would that look like? Which grade band would fit at which school would be an issue? You know, would it make more sense to have your K2 schools, your K2 students, younger students in town versus your more older students out of town? Interesting fact, how many students that go to North Bay live in town? What's the percentage?
What was that question?
How many students that attend North Bay Elementary School live in town?
Like
Percentage less.
half or more.
Majority, yes. Yeah.
It used to be 60%.
Yeah, between that 50-60, which is kind of surprising, because you think North Bay's way out there, but actually half the students, a little bit more than half of them are in town. So they're already in town, they're already crossing the bridge. So you know, it's not impacting quite as many as we kind of just might think on the surface. So these are all things that we can do some research into. Transportation adjustments, increased routing through lots of students getting picked up throughout both sides of town, getting taken to both sides of town as well. That can also create an opportunity to help with some of the family convenience factors in terms of bringing students back to a unified point for pickups. So it's something that could be addressed based on that actual complexity and challenge. Might need to look at some facility modifications, just depending on which building was decided for which. And again, both schools are designed, well, North Bay was designed as a middle school initially, so. But both are housing elementary students now, K5, so you know, there might be some minor modifications depending on the needs of the building. Hillcrest has a whole hallway full of classrooms with a toilet in the classroom, so that might be a factor. Thinking about the big advantage too for students that attend there. Staff reassignment and contractual considerations would be a big challenge, because we would want to make sure we did that in a way that honored what people want to teach and are successful teaching, and honor the seniority and schools of their preference. So we would have to work with the union and try to find some ways to make that fair, but it's a union process. some considerations we want to look into in depth, class sizes, restrooms available in the buildings. Playground equipment, size of it for age appropriateness. Assess needs for safety, accessibility, traffic flow in schools. Evaluate our technology, library facilities, cafeteria spaces to make sure that they make sense. I mean, right now they work for K-5, and we just want to make sure that they were, you know, the best they could do for the age band for serving in the school, if we're gonna create that identity in the school. We'll be looking at adjusting the routes and schedules to align with the reconfiguration, analyzing start end times. And trying to communicate clearly with families and staff about the changes well in advance. Looking at how to reassign staff to align with the grade level needs. Addressing seniority, contract implications, providing support, professional development for staff transitions. Conduct informal meetings with parents, staff, community, gather input, surveys and focus groups. Maintain transparency throughout the process. I think that, you know, essentially, you know, we can come up with lots of reasons why instruction this makes sense. And I do believe that instruction makes a lot of sense, but in the end, this is impacting families and the most. So if we want to continue to look at this further, if this is something that we'd like to find out some more information on, and explore, then we need to look at the enrollment capacity of the schools, what transportation might look like, how it might save us some money financially to do this. We want to look at it, we want to lay out a plan for stakeholder engagement, create a plan for facility staffing, our curriculum, communicate our messaging, and then have the board actually make some decisions. So it would be a phased rollout throughout the school year. And if it's something that the board is interested in us exploring more, it's something that we could look into this year and in more depth. It's, you know, it's something that we could say is something we look at next year. It really comes down to what the needs are. And I think a lot of it actually starts with some of that stakeholder engagement. Look, you know, we essentially need to assess the potential cost savings, what are the one-time additional costs that might be associated with this, and evaluate the impact on future capital maintenance planning. And with that, I would open it up to discussion and ideas from the board, or staff, thought on the process, and where we go next.
I think not a bad idea. I would like to see, kind of survey with the staff here. I think just to get, how they feel about it, just even just a 2-question, like. If this were to happen, which you're yes or no, basically, I wanna see like where they would be at, like how much pushback we would have.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Because parents don't know these things.
I guess even just staff, like I wanna see how,
I think the question without laying out like, without people really understanding what the benefits for this is, because as a parent, I have kids that go to Hillcrest and that will now go to North Bay.
yeah.
I understand that, but knowing everything else, that really outweighs it. But I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that you have to get a lot more information to people before you can ask them that question. Otherwise, it's gonna be a no.
Information first and then.
So basically, I
Yeah.
guess, Ian's like, is there a way to dip our toe in the water without causing panic?
I think the transparency is the big thing that, I think transparency is the big thing that we're talking about. I think that's the big thing, but I mean, I think we have to drive the boat and decide what we think is best for the district. Honestly, I think it comes to us and our decisions, and I don't think we need to put too much of that off. But I think we need to be very transparent about what we want to do and the reasons behind it. But you know, but what you're saying, you know, learning is one of the reasons I'm on this board. I really care, you know, my focus has been on the younger elementary ages. And all the benefits that you cite from this, just, you know, it supports that 100% and can do so much for the kids in our district. And, you know, in addition to what you have up there, you know, some things I'd like to see in the schools too, in the elementary level is, you know, after school clubs. And, you know, you can have more age appropriate ones. I'd like to see those happen again. You know, the tag program, there's not enough done there. If you could, you know, have them at each school. I mean, there's just so many ways that something like this would benefit our students, even though there are the drawbacks you talked about, but. So, from my point of view is, even though, yeah, I won't be dropping my kids off at school anymore if that happens in years, to me, the benefits to them are immense, so.
I think you've been mentioning that confident gifted program is a really good point, it's something that, the longstanding belief in that, we don't see money allocated to those programs on the state, and you don't see the investment in students that are future leaders and having the students all together, providing more opportunities to kind of really differentiate with the students' needs. That's a really good point in the bus too.
Is there, a school or a district in Oregon or somewhere close that face the problems that we're facing and transition to this?
I mean,
Because they did it.
Oh, I didn't know that,
Yeah,
did they?
Made us
Let's
have
see.
that set up.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And like I said, Estacada's going through it now. I mean, the reason is different, but it's too.
How long has that been going on? How long did they do that?
3-4 years, 4 yeah, 4 or 5 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
and how's that going?
It's going.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
I
mean,
don't know, I wouldn't guess that at that time that they did it because of declining enrollment, that they
Yeah.
did reconfigure at that time. And
okay, but I guess that's one thing I would love to see if we could look at a school that had declining enrollment or just massive class or whatever, just. I guess see how much positive, is it worth the headache? Is it actually that beneficial?
And that's kind of the thing with the Estacada is, even though their problem is opposite, it's for the same purpose of balancing. And so with them, and it's the same type of process that we're starting now, and they've just been going through it too. I mean, they're gonna initiate this next year, and it's really coming through with those. Okay, we've had the conversations, we've gathered input, not so much as. Is it a vote yes or no? It's more of what are the concerns? Let's see how we can help people. Let's see how we can overcome those. Is it a communication issue, or are there things we can put in place to help mitigate some of the concerns for our families to make the transition smooth? And for our students to make the transition smooth, and then actually just implement, and that's what they went into, but yes, that's a great question, we can find out some other days.
Yeah, I
that have gone through that, I think it's a great question.
I would say another thing too, in the core planning sessions for strategic planning, one of the things that was brought up too is the transition from 5th grade to middle school. And how that's been problematic in the past, especially for math, actually, and how they weren't even allowing kids to go forward. Was it in algebra at a certain age? Because they thought everyone needed to be mixed together to help, because it does, the students that are stronger can help lift everyone up. But if you have the kids combined at an earlier age, there's more opportunities and you're not gonna be facing that issue when they get into middle school. If they've already been, students and peers this whole time.
It's not uncommon for our district to have done different configurations. We've done a lot of configuration in this district over time. We had a K2 school for a while, Sunny Hill was a K2.
I went there.
Yeah, so we have had that,
Yeah.
and it functioned well when it did that. We had a K6 school for a while, that's what the elementary used to be. We had K4 elementaries. A lot of our needs have been based on facilities that we had available and resources that we had to staff those facilities to maximize the learning for kids as we went forward.
Well, and I feel like as we deal with declining enrollment, we're going to deal with staffing issues. And separating the schools like that, it does make sense, like you said, having to hire 2 different teachers for the school grade versus just 1 extra. If they're all in that one building. I think that does make a lot of sense for the future that we might possibly be facing.
Well, then if we do get a bunch of growth, fingers crossed, it seems like it also works well for fast growth, so.
Yes, it does, it's fast, yeah.
Oh, I don't, so when I was first hired in this district, I was hired as an elementary science specialist. And I bounced about between Hillcrest and North Bay, doing 4th, 5th, and 6th grade science. And then we had to cut that program. But I feel like the science at the elementary level is something that's really lacking. And as an elementary teacher, I know that it's a real struggle to set up labs at the elementary level when you're doing every single subject, right? And if we were able to configure something like this, I could see, even if we didn't have the monies to hire, like I'm hoping, oh, Levy, maybe we can get an elementary science specialist again, right? But even if we didn't have that, it would provide the possibility that if someone had a strength in science, that they would be able to say, oh, hey, let you teach social studies, I'll teach science, and we'll just trade our kids
Yeah.
throughout the day. And it would be equitable for the entire grade level, because last year I had some flexibility in my schedule. And because of my own, caseload, and so I was able to like say, hey, fifth grade teachers at Hillcrest, I'm here, I have a little flexibility, I will teach a lab for you. And it worked really well, but yet North Bay didn't get that, and so there was it was an inequitable opportunity, right? But anyway, so I think that
Is there
this
a,
configuration provides some opportunities for creative thinking.
Okay.
Anyway.
is there a, temperature with the other teachers and what you guys are thinking?
I just threw that's my own.
I know, that's
opinion.
why,
I'm not
exactly.
speaking for the union.
So,
I'm-
I was just curious with the other teachers that are here, what their thoughts are.
That'd be a big change. I think it's a lot to digest. You know, I mean, having grown up in this area, we've seen the transition over the decades from neighborhood schools to consolidated schools, and this is another step in that. So that's a big deal. On the other hand, there's a good case to be made for the efficiency and for flexibility to growth.
Like I said, not the elementary guy. As I work with districts in my career, one of the benefits I've seen to that model, of having K through 2, 4, 55 species, is cultural. So right now you have 2 schools where you have 2 different groups of kids, and when they get middle school,
Yeah.
they're put together. Whereas with this model, they've been with these kids. There's a consistency to the kids they're.
It's unified,
interacting with and
yeah.
building relationships with, that I think will pay off in the culture standpoint, as these kids move up together through these different steps.
We do have at least one program that will impact pretty substantially, and that's our ALL program, which usually does run. It is only based out of Hillcrest, so we would have to find some means to provide support for the other school for those students that would be in there, because it is grade level specific as you do that. We want to make sure that we get that support in there as well, but there are those issues.
There are people who we do this people if they did want to speak. I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Yeah, anybody, please. Always good.
Like I said, it's a lot to digest, and it will represent a huge cultural shift for those schools. My personal opinion, I support it. But I don't, it'd be great to survey the teachers, get it, on the school. I know that it's a lot of change. It's a great idea personally, that's.
Just one last thing that I wanted to, being in the schools, you see classes that come through each school right now that have a huge, certain students can have a huge impact. If you only have 3 classrooms, the placement just to split them up. And the other school may not have that particular problem that year, but they have another grade level that has that problem. By combining, equalizing the playing field and making things easier on teachers as you do that. I mean, it's gonna split those kids up, but much easier in a grade level where you have more options. So,
I feel like there will be growing pains if we did decide to go like this in the beginning, but once it smooths out, it might be beneficial.
Right, I mean, if we found ourselves in a situation where we had to redraw our boundaries anyways, I know that that also brings a lot of.
So it sounds like by doing it this way, it would prevent that from having to redraw the lines a bunch of times.
As long as we are a 2
And maybe-
elementary school district, do not have to break it.
Well, And it's just like the issue with 4th grade this year, about how big it is at Hillcrest and whether you're gonna send those kids back to North Bay where their district did. And they didn't want to because they've been there, but then it's to the
Yeah.
detriment of the
Right.
teachers here and some of the students that now have large class sizes, and that just makes that go away.
Right, I mean, I do personally feel there's a big disservice to a family when you say you can go to this school
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're calling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Saying you can't come here.
Yeah.
It avoids running into those problems as well. If whatever, that's what people are parent and For anybody else who's saying?
Well, I'm a parent and a teacher.
Yes, you are.
I really kind of want to stay neutral for teachers' sakes on, just because I know for some teachers, this feels like their whole role is crashing down. I do want to be the voice of that for them. Because they've been taught in one school for decades and it just feels like now I have to change everything, but. You know, Brian and I, we're from Oklahoma and our school was set up like this in Oklahoma and our kids went through. Schools that were laid out like this and it was very positive for a very small community with. You know, 2 different populations and so the kids. There were lines, I guess, and so our kids were friends with all kinds of kids, I guess. And there wasn't really any barriers to. And I can say, kind of see that in this community, it makes me sad. Having worked in those schools, I see, you know, differences in population. So I do support figuring out resources that utilize or we've got. But I do have a lot of teacher friends, but I think this will be sad for them, but I think that there's a lot of positive that could come out of this. I think it needs to be kind of researched. And I love the open forum opportunity.
That's. You're principal or something?
I think, there's absolute pros and cons to this. At the management level, there's a lot of efficiencies that would help, like what Tim, addressed up there, just everything from PE to PLCs to curriculum. I mean, there's so many, and cost sizes, there's so many pros. I also think from a manager perspective, we have 100 kids at Hillcrest are not zoned for Hillcrest, 100 of the 430 students in the list. And part of me wonders how many IETs we would lose from that, having to go to North Bay for a spot in North Bay compared to coming to Hillcrest. That's one concern. Another concern would be really approaching this with staff, and like what Leah said, when you are a teacher, and especially for those staff members who there are many of them who have only taught at Hillcrest or have only taught maybe at Hillcrest and then maybe what other district can't compare between Hillcrest and North Bay. I think that is something that needs to be treated and stepped on very lightly, because that is part of their identity and what they've done for their entirety of their career. Changing districts is difficult, changing buildings is difficult, changing grade levels is difficult. I've done all of them and I know how much you feel like you lose with your team members, your families, your parents, and then of course the loss of even not getting to see the kids go from a K to a high experience. There's other positives there though too. Then you build more team members, you build more efficiencies, you build more knowledge about what that needs to look up within the grade band, maybe right below or above you. And since I've been here in North Bend, one thing that I have heard specifically from the middle school, something that she mentioned was, when we get kids from Hillcrest, we know certain things based on this, or this. When we get kids from North Bay, we see this, or this. So I know that they at the middle school recognize differences, which is not fair. That's a very and that's just a sad thought that there's something there that is not equitable enough that the kids and or the staff are not getting for each other. So my kids are graduated or a senior in high school this year. This does not affect me as a parent, but I know how it will affect educators as just their identity and as.
It's okay, I can wait, I wanted to know when the last time that we've been here, I was posted that at the time to the breakfast section, when was the last time?
Last time would have been, and it was
It's my house.
fifth grade came back, the elementary leave was the last reconfiguration we had. And we did some, and that's a zone.
2016.
15 or 16, yeah, I think it was that was the last one we had. What was the number?
It was a judge, it was a judge.
I think it was 13 or 14, it started at 14.
I can't remember the year, that was the last.
Was it a big, was it a rough time? I know it's just one.
It was not as rough a time for that one because you just kept the fourth grade that you had there and they stayed as fifth grade. So it wasn't as rough for the kids. It was a little bit tougher on staff because they had to move at that point. But that was one of the easier reconfigurations we had, was keeping fifth grade at the elementary. And that, but when we moved fifth grade to the middle school, which was 4 or 5 years before that, that was a big deal at that point. It was a big deal when we moved sixth grade to the elementary, or to the middle school.
So I have a question, like following up on that, like. All these, if we did this, are we looking at more reconfigurations in the future, or is this kind of how it is? Cause I mean, there is something to be said with some stability long term. I mean. Are we make this change, go in this direction, is there then gonna be another change, or is this kind of. How it's gonna be pretty long term?
I mean, I feel like if we decided to go this route, it would create a system that would be able to. Fluctuate either way, either the population is going down or up. I think we can handle that without creating.
Yeah, it would definitely be nice to, I mean, you can't always predict those kinds of things in moment or whatever, but yeah, that whatever looks like it's gonna be sustainable for the longest. So we're not having to do a lot of bouncing around and switching around and all that. I think, yeah, stability, cause I'm the same way. My kids go to North Bay, my 2 younger kids. And I love North Bay, my kids love North Bay. And I, as a parent, I'm like, no, they have to stay there no matter what. But when I first saw this, I was like, oh my God, no. But then I read through it and then I listened, I was like, no, that's a lot of really positive. I mean, that's a lot of potential for a lot of good stuff,
That's
so.
what I thought
I
too. Oh
hope
my
it-
God, no, that's
So
why I
opposite.
said, that's why I said survey.
I was like, no,
Oh my God,
no.
They need to reconfigure again, but I think it would be based upon space available. Type of options, if you exceeded the space in both those schools,
Well,
then
yeah,
you'd have to look at some
Yeah, okay.
other options as you go out there.
Yeah.
The other factor that comes in, I was talking about inter-district transfers. I mean, would we lose them, would we not? Depending on the configuration, if you had one school in town being a K2, you might be able to attract more inter-district transfers. And the beauty of that, having been in this before, is you could give parents answers quicker. You don't
Yeah.
wait till August to give answers, which has always bothered all of us, I think.
Yeah.
Not being able to definitively speak which school you're in and whether you can come in as a kindergartner. As a parent, that would just rip your heart out to know that. And it would allow us to respond to the number of requests we have for IDTs earlier and fill staff and maybe create another position.
Yeah,
At that point, and keep numbers realistic in there.
yeah.
So
No, overall,
there-
I think there's a lot of good stuff.
It does help that, I mean, having the information first, and so I feel like letting the information get out there. Working hard to make sure that people understand like the pros and the cons that we're seeing and that have been said here. I think that's an important first step to making sure that if we choose to do this, it goes. Maybe a little less bumpy.
I'm Megan, though, we gotta be careful about surveys. If we put a survey out to parents, we have to respect what their answers are. And then we're sure it's something we're gonna do. I mean, that's a really touchy thing.
Yeah.
Surveys, I mean, you don't ask a survey unless you're willing to take their feedback.
Well, can we do a kind of in ways, like do just the staff first and get that feedback first and digest that and go from there, or do you think that's gonna be the
I
same
think the
problem?
survey, the concept is same in terms of, what potential challenges do you see, what questions do we need answered? What are the pros and cons, because then you're addressing those things, it's more of the yes or no.
Yeah.
Because there might be reasons why you would need to a yes, and you don't want it to, I mean, the intent isn't to disrespect it.
Right.
Really respect it.
Yeah,
And
the problem is, I think we have to be really careful all the time when we're gonna go out for, we don't wanna make everybody mad right before.
Yeah,
I mean, I would want to just stop,
we have to be smart about how we,
That's a thing, yeah.
yeah, that's a really good point.
but I'm up for it.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
Did you have one more comment?
Oh, well, I
I know, one thing I didn't notice mentioned at all is that our life skills program is already K-2-5, and I didn't know if there was anything there that also needed to be communicated about what we've learned from that, or the impact that doing that has put on the spray bands that have such a concentrated population of life skills and well-being.
That's a great question. I mean, we're so early in the process, but, you know, we saw numbers go up much higher than we thought in third grade, for example. And yet you don't have enough sections to really get those kids in the classrooms the way you'd like to. Whereas if you had a couple more classrooms, I think it would really help that program quite a bit. Of course, if in fact the reconfiguration led the 3-5 to be, you know, out in the bay, then now that those groups, that they would now be transitioning and getting back to that school. And speaking of special education, that was a good point. That conversation I had earlier today with special education teacher, just the thought of having the 5, you know, all those years with the same group of kids or the same families makes communication a little bit easier. So another transition piece to think about with a group of students who potentially need some more supports. I think what's next would be sort of some of the things we outlined on the presentation there. I mean, I think that there's some valid information we need to gather from staff and from parents about just thinking about the process and seeing the kind of questions they have, because even here tonight, I'm hearing things that, you know, I just hadn't thought of, because, you know, I see certain things, and so we want to kind of elicit all those responses, see what we need to answer, and then perhaps have, you know, a couple more open forums like this and kind of get people's input.
Will you be able to kind of present what you just did with us to the staff?
I absolutely can.
Because that seems. But I mean, like, that's a huge thing for them. Even like them tonight, you guys hearing some of the things was probably helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have actually set up listening sessions with all 4 schools. Directors, myself, are gonna go to the schools and talk to the teachers, and we want to hear about some of the challenges they're facing, some of the successes. And it will be an appropriate time to kind of introduce these topics without taking up all the time, but at least get the information out there. And start getting staff thinking about it. So those are starting next Monday. So we'll do 3 schools next week and another school the following week. Following that, I wanted to get a couple more members into some schools, talk to administrators, and then, you know, also kind of begin that whole concept of starting curriculum goals and surveying the community and staff about some of the things they'd like to see.
All right, let's move on.
Do you want
learn style?
So that to go, get more information?
Yeah.
You got it.
We're talking about ESP service credits.
One action item that I appreciate you adding to the agenda tonight. So South Coast ESD, as part of an educational service, we earn service credits for the students that are enrolled in our school district that are part of the larger region. So that the ESD then provides service credits to us per ORS outlined there. We also have the opportunity to take a certain amount of those credits in lieu of services as payment. And we could take anywhere from, so let's say our population generates a certain amount of dollars for the ESD that then come back to us in services. 90% of those, of the dollars our students create, actually have to come back to the North Bend School District in services or in payment and will services by statute. So the ESD is allowed to keep 10% for their operational costs, 90% comes back. What happens is the superintendents of the region decide on these sort of tiered model. Tiered 1 services go to all students in the region. We all pitch into that equally. We then order off of a tier 2 menu for other services, things like speech and language pathologists, you know, autism specialists or evaluations, one-to-one nurses, when we need those, are all ordered from this tier 2 menu. And then anything left over goes into this tier 3 category. Statute also gives us the ability, though, to withdraw up to 100% of that 90%. So the ESD always gets to keep 10% initially off the top so they can operate. And then you could withdraw all you could withdraw completely, take 90% cash and those services, and then we're out of the DSD. Now, we could order services from them, but at a premium. Or you can take percentages, and the board has the authority to decide what percentage that is. And if we take less than 50%, we as a district and we in general would have the ability to retain voting authority within the superintendent's group for the services that ESD provides. Right now, we order quite a few services from our ESD. So I 100% support us staying in the ESD, but we don't need to leave 100% of our 90% in the ESD. What I'm requesting from the board is that we take 10% in lieu of services. And this has to be presented, board votes, I present it to the ESD by November 1st for next school year. And for example, this school year, we were allocated about 1.4 million in service credits. So this 10% would take out about $140,000. And instead of leaving it there, so let's say we pay for a tier 1, we order off our tier 2 menu, and then anything left over, it's retained in the ESD. Well, that always leaves a question, will we always have access to that? By taking the 10% off the top and having it paid to us in lieu of services, we guarantee we get access to that because it's coming to us first. So by taking the 10%, we still have the finances needed in the ESD to order the services we currently have and not leave that extra in there as an independent balance. So that's what I'm requesting the authority to do, take the 10%.
Is that 10% that you know to specifically the study program in our district?
It goes to what we need to, yeah, so what we would essentially,
That's what I'm asking.
if we needed to, if we, let's say we ordered our services from our tier 2 and we needed to get something else, we could still access it, we would just be paying for it, this money will pay for it, yes, 100%.
Just feel like we keep having these dollar conversations about specifically sped dollars that are being spent in sped. I mean, I know that you can cash them out in year, but you can win some in elsewhere, but then you're like.
We do spend them on sped, I mean, I think what we probably wanna do is look at how much money we do spend on special education, because we spend a considerable amount of the budget on it. So even if it becomes part of a larger pot, it's still money that benefits it. Because we pay a lot of money from general fund for it, so that's really what this would be for. It would allow us, instead of having to order off of that menu, if we needed to add an educational assistant or a teacher, we would have the resource to do it and hire ourselves. And that's exactly what that would do. For, I would agree, it should be money that's available for special education to support it. 100%.
Anything else? Board? Anybody want to make a motion?
I move that, that the district, request to receive 10% of cash in lieu of the services as provided under RS 334177. And that we authorize, superintendent to complete, the documentation with South Coast ESD to receive the 10% cash in lieu of the services by November 1st, 2025 for the 26-27 school year. All right.
Now,
I'll second that.
You did great.
We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have some weak guys there. Okay, close to getting money.
now we have the test on levy.
No, I'm not stuck.
Now we're at number 8, adjourn.
Thank you.